He jolted awake in a room that hadn't been cleaned in ages, as if he just escaped a nightmare. The first thing he wanted to do was sit up, but his body, it hurt like hell. Had he been sleeping or had he been beaten? But eventually, he managed to sit on the edge of the bed, though it wasn't easy. Finally, he could see the mess around him. It looked like the patient himself didn't understand what was going on here. But he felt no fear, so he immediately decided to explore the area. No fear, no survival instincts either. He didn't even realize he didn't have the strength to get up from the bed. It didn't end with just one fall. He couldn't make sense of what the hell was happening. Images from the past floated in his mind, but it felt like he'd lost his memory. His body trembled, and there was a rotten, sour taste in his mouth, but he still decided to get up. This time, he succeeded. So this genius decided he didn't need IV drips anymore. Stumbling, he stepped into the hallway. But there was an even bigger mess waiting for him. This was starting to scare him. He decided to check the elevator, but it seemed there was no power. He had to take the stairs. At least there were railings. Downstairs, the scene was the same. Broken windows. Everything looked like a hurricane had swept through. And not a single living soul. What had happened here? Thirst overwhelmed him. He drank water greedily like an animal. After quenching his thirst, he noticed something. He suddenly stood up, looked around, but there was nothing. He felt like someone had been there. So without thinking too long, he decided to head back. He grabbed his things. There might be something that could help him understand. His phone. As expected, it was dead. Well, at least there was a window for entertainment, just to look out of it, of course. However, when he saw what was outside the hospital, he simply couldn't believe his eyes. It felt like someone was playing a cruel joke. What the hell? He exhaled wearily, as if trying to calm himself down. When suddenly he heard a sound. An old lady was pushing a cart, and there were dogs with her. So it wasn't all bad, at least he wasn't alone in this chaos. Suddenly the old lady stopped, as if she sensed someone was staring at her, and she turned to the guy. But right after that, she walked away, seeming to quicken her pace. He tried to shout for the old lady to stop. He wanted to know what had happened, but his voice was so weak and quiet. How long had he been silent? But the guy couldn't just give up. He immediately ran downstairs. He had to catch up with the old lady, but he barely made it out of the room before he fell. He had no strength in his body. How long had he been starving? This question needed an immediate answer. The guy found a pantry stocked with various supplies, and he greedily ate everything in sight. Even unwashed raw vegetables seemed appetizing at that moment. But just a second later, his stomach had other ideas. What was happening? Suddenly, he heard something strange again. The first time was a coincidence, but twice was a pattern. He gathered all his strength and shouted as loudly and fiercely as he could, demanding to know who was there. But it was silent. After that, he continued to eat greedily, ignoring the nausea. What had happened here? War? Mom? Dad? How were they? How long had he been in the hospital? A month? 2? His mind felt foggy. Memories began to surface. It seemed he had often been a punching bag and hadn't earned any respect among the bullies. He should have just given up back then. If he had known what would happen, he would have been more careful. Those guys had heard he trained a lot before, but now it seemed all that was left was endurance. Although he had fought back against those punks, they just kept coming, and he was all alone. He even left a scar on the leader's face. Overall, it was stupid to mess with the school gang. That redhead said the guy had to bring him $1,000,000 every month for his injury treatment. He should have given up from the start. He had no chance against the whole gang. But back then, he told that punk it was his own fault. Of course, that infuriated the idiot. Just give up. Just give up. Even if he had to beg for forgiveness, he had to do it. But then he claimed the leader wouldn't be able to do anything to him himself. That was the last straw. They all pounced on the poor guy, just like cowards do, ganging up on one. But he endured it all. He really had a lot of endurance. Although his strength was starting to fade, in this situation, he was very easy prey, especially when there were so many people against him. Blow after blow. How much longer could he endure? How long could he stay on his feet? It felt like his end was near. Those punks didn't stop at all. They loved the thrill, and they were completely out of control. They didn't even notice when they threw the guy over the railing. He was falling down from a high floor, after which he jolted awake. That was where his memories ended. He couldn't remember anything else. Time to go. He wouldn't learn anything if he stayed here. He hadn't noticed this before. His hair had grown so long. How long had he been lying there? A year? Half a year? First, he definitely needed to find people. And then his family. Was there still police here? Administration? Where could they all be? Surprisingly, he clearly remembered where to go. His legs led him where he needed to go. Even though a lot of time had passed since he woke up, he still couldn't stop being amazed. There wasn't a single living place left in the entire neighborhood. Everything was in ruins. What could have happened? These questions would remain unanswered for a long time. The guy walked for quite a while but didn't meet anyone. He only saw a vending machine with drinks and snacks, but it had been looted. Just then, he finally sensed the presence of living beings. But now he wasn't sure he really wanted that. Those dogs didn't look very friendly. Quite the opposite. They looked ready to pounce on the poor guy. Suddenly, the old lady appeared, and everything was okay again. The dogs loved her. At that moment, the old lady noticed him. The guy's voice suddenly trembled. He couldn't find the words, but he still asked to talk to her. Before he could mention his problems, the woman silently placed a package in his hands. Then she advised him to be careful and hide as soon as possible. And then she just disappeared, leaving the guy with even more questions. Without thinking too long, he opened the package and couldn't believe his luck. A ton of food? The guy started gobbling everything down, forgetting the old lady's second piece of advice to hide quickly. At that moment, a car drove by. It even honked at the guy. Then a cheerful and friendly guy appeared from there. Finally, people. He was thrilled about this, and they looked so pleasant. Now he would find all the answers to his questions. The naive guy approached closer, immediately starting to ask what was going on. But he shouldn't have been so trusting and careless. The strong air flipped him in the air. His whole face was covered in blood. Those punks just wanted to steal his food. They didn't even think there were still such stupid people left. The old lady watched all this holding her angry dogs. Meanwhile, in the city, or at least what was left of it, it was getting dark. The scene shifted back to the hospital. There were those same strange sounds the guy had heard. By his bed was a robot, a monster, a reptile with a tail. School, he needed to find his notes. He had to go back. He had been too cocky before, doing well in school and sports. But where had that confidence led him? School, he didn't want to go back. Had the world really fallen apart? Maybe it was better this way. As long as he didn't have to return. Ha! His face felt so warm. Blood. Was he dying? But no, it was just the dogs. The old lady was glad the guy had woken up. She hated those punks, no better than robbers. The guy's head was wrapped in bandages and hurt a lot. The old lady reached for a first aid kit. She asked what injury he had before, as she had seen him in the hospital, and asked if he understood what was happening. The guy asked if it was war. She didn't know. Maybe it was war. The world had just plunged into chaos. The dogs still hadn't fully accepted the guy. They were a bit angry, but they promised that once they became friends, they would stand by him, especially the light-colored dog. He didn't seem so mean anymore. Suddenly, I won't comment on that. Meanwhile, some time passed, and the guy was feeling better. He was planning to find shelter. The old lady was seeing him off. He called her too, but it turned out her husband thought it was dangerous there. He went to look for food and would be very angry if he found out the old lady had helped the guy. He promised to return and repay everything. But the old lady said the guy had already repaid everything. After all, people like seeds grow to bear fruit. To be honest, the guy didn't understand much, but he politely thanked her for everything. And he left. He didn't know if he would ever meet that friendly old lady again, but he hoped so. His stomach betrayed him. But this time the young man was smarter. He looked around, after which he hid to eat carefully. And then he set off again, this time without any adventures or losing consciousness. He walked for a long time. It was harder on foot, until he reached where he was headed. Inside there were a lot of people. They showed him the way. He approached a girl filling out paperwork and asked a few questions. She asked where the guy had been hiding all this time, but without waiting for an answer, she asked for his name, age, and address. Ideally, a passport. Well, meet Kanyeon, a 19-year-old guy. He asked what month it was now. April 13th, the girl replied calmly. Kanyeon was very confused, constantly looking around. There was a little girl celebrating her birthday. The girl asked for his details again, and Kanyeon corrected her, saying he was now 20 years old. After which, he asked if he could use the phone or the internet, but it turned out it was only for emergencies. The connection was spotty, and the electricity was barely holding up. She showed Kani on the radio and said that now it was their era. After that, she showed the guy where to go, promising she would call later. And Khan left, constantly looking around at the people. Everyone was busy with their own things, just living their lives. It all felt so strange. Meanwhile, night had fallen. And in the morning, everyone was awakened. That girl, she was shouting through a megaphone that they had to take care of their health if they wanted to return to their old lives. After which, a collective workout began. So, Connie Yon spent a few days in the shelter, and it even started to seem like everything was getting better. Aid was being distributed in goods, and it wasn't bad. From what he knew, the community hadn't completely fallen apart yet. You could even say it was slowly returning to normal. It was quite peaceful here, unlike those ruined buildings, and the people seemed quite focused on the future. Although nearby, some not-so-decent-looking men were arguing and figuring out who was to blame for what had happened. An old man used a lollipop as an example, saying their little planet revolved around the sun, minding its own business, but suddenly, boom, something crashed into the earth. And, as everyone else knew, the world experienced 34 hours of continuous earthquakes. There had never been worse cases in history. But what was even more surprising was that there were no casualties. Something had stopped the functions of the modern world with minimal force. Something like an EMP attack, like shooting a tranquilizer straight into the earth. But that was physically impossible. But no terrorist or country could have done that, turning the whole world into a 13,900 period. That old man decided it was the work of aliens, after which Kanyeon realized he was crazy and continued reading his book. After that, he decided to go to that girl who hadn't been very friendly and ask how to find his loved ones. But she had already said that the only people she knew lived here. Many were also in government bunkers, so they were safe, and there were few casualties in the city, so his loved ones were probably okay. The internet wasn't working at all, and until they fixed it, she couldn't do much. Just then, Kan Eon suggested sending a letter when the radio suddenly came to life. She quickly shushed Kan Eon and started listening. The radio promised to broadcast emergency channels. Suddenly, the girl screamed and started scolding the school kids. They were trying to return everything to how it was, and those punks were just ruining everything. Then Kan Eon remembered the words of that old lady, who had also complained about the school kids behaving terribly. The girl pulled Kan Eon from his thoughts, asking him to calm down and wait in the shelter, as the risk of crime was still high. She explained that there was a high school nearby, and the boys had taken it over, creating their paradise, robbing people all over the neighborhood, after which Kan Eon left. Although he didn't know what had happened to his school, there was one thing he was sure of. It would be much safer for the old folks here than where they were now. So Kan Eon didn't listen to anyone and left. He felt he was obligated to lead them to safety. He was just passing a stop with many abandoned bicycles. It was a great idea since public transport wasn't running. This way, he would get to the old folks much faster and safer. Surprisingly, he didn't meet anyone on the way, when suddenly, he saw those punks right by the old lady's house. They were attacking the elderly, but it seemed that old man was quite capable of standing up for himself. He quoted Socrates to them, and those idiots were scared of new knowledge. After which, he commanded his dog, "Get him!" And suddenly that sweet little dog turned into a real beast. Kan Eon stood in shock, watching as those punks fled screaming like cowards. "Wait, hold on! What was that?" Kan Eon was too busy to hear the buzzing. Honestly, it was pretty entertaining to watch the tough guys suddenly turn into mama's boys. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to another location. To school. There, the tough guys crawled in, scared, to complain to the boss. They were crying like little kids, saying an old man almost attacked them with a crowbar and that they barely escaped from two dogs. Among them was the boss, evident from his clothes. He was just eating, but then suddenly spat everything out. He then shoved it at Mr. Pak and asked what kind of crap he had given him, while the teacher was too scared to say a word, his voice trembling as the student yelled at Pak. The teacher offered to cook it again, but the boss reminded him that he had asked him to protect him in exchange for cooking. Even though Mr. Pak swore he did everything the same as before, that little punk didn't care. He started shoving meat into the teacher's mouth. And there was that punk with the scar that Kan Eon had left him. He said Mr. Pak should have tried harder. After that, the boss turned to those idiots who came back empty-handed, even though they claimed the old folks had plenty of food. They started making excuses, saying the old man nearly killed them, and the dogs were a problem too. But Sun Chun didn't want to hear any of it. He suddenly snapped and shot up from his seat. Did those two really think the boss should do all the dirty work himself? Did he really think that excuse would work? The whole world turned into chaos. It was a battlefield and he was whining like a crybaby. And for what? Because a couple of old folks scared them? Idiots! Sun Chun ordered them to go back again and told Taishan to go with them. Meanwhile, Mr. Pak was recovering from what had just happened to him. Sun Chun boldly put his feet on the table and told him not to annoy him, just do his job. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to the old folks. Overall, they were doing fine. Kan Eon explained why he had come back and invited them to join him. However, the boy realized that Grandpa hadn't heard him because he was busy yelling at those punks. So he called him again to the shelter. But this really angered Grandpa. Who did he think he was showing up here? At that moment, Grandma intervened and reminded him that she had told him about Kan Eon. But that didn't help. The old man stood his ground, thinking he could protect his family himself. Kan Eon stood firm, trying to convince them. Then Grandpa started quoting Plato, but the boy didn't understand anything. The old man wanted to say that a person could only live by what they believed, so he wouldn't change his mind. Kan Eon tried to say that his philosophy didn't matter, but Grandpa shut him up, believing that was what united the world. Then Grandma intervened, yelling at them that she was going to get the cart because she was fed up with them. Her husband suddenly turned soft and begged her not to go outside. He would handle everything himself. After that, Grandpa smiled at his wife and went outside with the dogs, Soybean and Rovichevsky. When he left, Grandma explained that it was all because she had been injured during the evacuation by people who wanted to live. Since then, he had tried to do everything himself. He had yelled a lot, but he was a good man. Suddenly, strange sounds came from outside. Kan Eon, with a trembling voice, announced that they had returned. Grandma could no longer sit still. Her husband was out there. Grandpa was holding his own, not showing fear. On the contrary, he threatened to smash those punks' heads. Without waiting long, he charged into battle, barking orders at the dogs, ready to show the strength of his philosophy. But before he could even land a blow, Taishan snatched the crowbar from him and hit him in the head with a bat. Grandpa fell to the ground. Then the dogs intervened, but this time, the idiots were prepared and had leashes to tie up the dogs. Taishan said he would let the old man go if he handed over all the food he had hidden. The man barely had time to curse that punk. Just then, Kan Eon appeared, shoved Taishan, and ran to Grandpa. He didn't even notice who that punk was. But Taishan recognized Conwell. A smile appeared on his dumb face as he said he had heard Kan Eon had become a vegetable. At that moment, he also started to remember. Kan Eon tried to keep his emotions in check and politely asked Taishan to go back where he came from. But of course the punk didn't listen and just started reminding him how he had once beaten him up. However, just like before, the boy stood his ground and didn't run away. He wasn't backing down. Kan Eon spoke confidently, saying that Taishan had never fought fairly since he always had two idiots by his side. This left the punk in shock. He didn't like it when his honor was questioned. It was a sore spot for him. While they were talking, Grandpa had recovered. He grabbed the crowbar and started threatening those idiots. But Taishan hit him again. Kan Eon couldn't understand why this old man was so stubborn and foolish. Then the boy couldn't take it anymore. He turned to hit Taishan. That punk was getting on his nerves. But before he could even land a blow, the red-haired friend hit him in the stomach with the bat. Suddenly, Kan Eon remembered everything he had felt back then, that day. But Taishan didn't stop. He began to kick him while he was down. Now he could laugh as much as he wanted, saying the hospital hadn't done Kan any good since he had become much slower than before. At that moment, a dog barked. He really liked Kan from the first sight, so he wanted to protect his friend. Taishan started hitting them too. At that moment, Grandma ran out. She rushed to hit the robbers and curse them. But Taishan just swatted her away like a fly, and the old lady fell. The man couldn't bear to see how his wife was suffering. Grandma looked so scared and weak. Taishan thanked the old folks for the show they put on since Grandma just fell unconscious. Suddenly, the man started crying. He screamed that he wouldn't know what to do without his wife and begged her not to die. Then Kan Eon intervened. He decided to charge at Taishan again. He couldn't just let this go. The old folks had helped him a lot. But he failed again. It was hard to fight someone who had a bat. Did Kan Eon really think he could defeat Taejin? The punk started hitting the boy over and over, blood splattering everywhere. He suddenly went completely insane, screaming and wishing for Kan Eon's death. Taejin was out of his mind. He had completely lost it. Just like back then, he couldn't stop. And this time, he wouldn't stop. His partners were already starting to fear what this monster was capable of. A considerable amount of time passed before Taejin simply got tired. There was a pool of blood around Kan Eon. He hadn't shown any signs of life for a long time. Taejin silently stared at what he had done. It seemed he suddenly came to his senses and felt a pang of guilt. That's when the punk was engulfed by aggression. He yelled at his stupid partners that they still hadn't searched the house like they were supposed to. The frightened idiots left. One of them took one last look at Kan Eon, convinced that the poor guy was just dead. Taejin grabbed his head as if it had suddenly started to hurt, and he went into the building. Those idiots wouldn't manage without him. Behind them was the hospital where Kan Eon lay. That was where the sound was coming from, all because of that robot or monster. It was really loud and seemed to be heading straight for those robbers. Maybe it would turn out to be even worse. The scene shifted back in time, long before those terrible events, to when a very beautiful girl was running toward Eon. Her name was Rin, and she was really upset that Kan hadn't answered her calls. She asked how her friend had done on the test, and then said the problem was probably with her since Kan Eon had started doing better in school after quitting sports. That annoyed her. Suddenly, Rin noticed a scratch on his face, even though Kan Eon claimed he had just fallen. He sounded very unsure. He was curious what she would think when she found out the school gang had beaten him up. But that's why Kan Eon wasn't planning to share that with her. They were standing, waiting for food when Rin asked what she should tell his mom, since Kan's mother sometimes called her to ask how he was doing. Kan Eon repeated again that he hadn't been in a fight, but Rin didn't believe him. She asked him to stop getting into fights, finish his education nicely, and marry her. Should I even mention that Kan Eon turned completely red? Rin didn't see anything wrong with that since his mother always said she wanted them to get married. So Rin invited herself over to Kan Eon's house to study for the test. Eon's mother greeted Rin and called her her future daughter-in-law. While Kan was processing everything that was happening, his girls were chatting sweetly with each other like old relatives. It turned out that his mother had rushed in to grab some papers, so she quickly left, leaving instructions for the kids and saying goodbye. She asked them not to fight, but the friends were long past being kids for that. Well, what did you expect to see? They were actually studying, yeah. Kan Eon was explaining something very attentively when he suddenly fell silent. He noticed that Rin wasn't listening at all. She was just staring at him. When Kan Eon asked what was wrong, his friend suddenly stood up and left. She took the first aid kit from his house and said she would treat his wound. Kan was taken aback that Rin knew where their first aid kit was. He wanted to protest. Rin didn't have to take care of him. He was strong. But his friend had bigger leverage. She promised to complain to his mom. There was nothing he could do about that. Rin asked him not to fight anymore. She didn't want Kan Eon to show up at their wedding all beaten up too. He didn't pay attention to that, when suddenly, Rin also asked him to take care of his body since it was hers. At that moment, something happened inside him. Something very warm. Butterflies? Those were just memories. In reality, he could barely breathe and had miraculously survived once again. Grandma lay powerless, her husband crying beside her, lamenting that it was all his fault and he should have taken his wife to the hospital. She had just come to her senses and didn't remember what had happened at all. It turned out that Soybean had died, and Rovachevsky was barely breathing. Grandma couldn't hold back her tears. She loved her dog so much. What were they going to do now? Suddenly, footsteps were heard from downstairs. It was Kan Eon. He was holding Rovachevsky in his arms, saying the dog was still breathing. All his pain suddenly vanished when he saw Grandma. Her appearance. She was barely holding on. Tears in her eyes broke the boy's heart. That was the last straw. They had to do something, because the bandits could come again. So the old folks finally decided to go to the shelter. They needed help. Kan Eon helped carry Grandma and the dog. His whole body was in terrible pain and burning. But what had happened? He was powerless, but he didn't think he was seriously injured. Was he lucky? Weak. He was so weak. A worthless fool who just kept rushing forward. He couldn't do anything. He was so worthless. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to another place. A helicopter was flying in the sky. Rin saw it. Her friend also noticed that the helicopter was flying too slowly. Maybe it was watching them? She added that every time she saw a helicopter, she felt calmer. Rin was silent and didn't take her eyes off the sky. Then suddenly, she started rushing somewhere and ordered her friend to gather her clothes faster. No explanations. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to school. Sun Chun was walking down the hallway when something caught his attention. He went into the bathroom because of the sound of running water. He saw Taijin there. He hadn't expected to see him. Taijin asked if they had told the boss. It turned out those guys were trembling. It seemed this redhead had made quite an impression on them, but the main thing was that they now had food. Good job. But it seemed Taijin didn't think so. He asked Sun Chun if he remembered Eon. The boss didn't understand why he was bringing up that loser. Taijin started talking. His voice was very quiet, as if he were confessing to a pastor. But Sun Chun interrupted him before he could even start, telling his partner not to fill his head with nonsense, since hadn't he heard the helicopter? It seemed they were dropping supplies. They needed to grab it. After that, the boss turned and left, saying he would be on the roof, asking him not to bother him, and finally ordered Taijin to wash the blood off himself and stop shaking his hands. And then he disappeared. Suddenly, at the top, he ran into Quan Rin. Turned out the girls had also stayed at school. Sun Chun asked why they were carrying wet clothes and asked them to wash those too, since some of the boys already smelled like crap. Rin wondered if his boys didn't have hands. They could wash their own clothes. But Sun Chun stood his ground, saying they were busy guarding the school and looking for food. But Rin wasn't asking for that. She wanted everyone to find their own food and do what they wanted. But Sun Chun stood firm, saying that as a group, they had to maintain peace and communicate well. After all, civilization had turned to ashes. It was dangerous out there. Didn't she know? Rin was angry that Sun Chun decided who was strong and who wasn't. The girls didn't even know if it was safe outside since they just weren't allowed out. After that, the girls left. Rin's friend wanted to get away quickly. Sun Chun was angry. He watched the girls leave. Then he slammed the door to the roof shut. He grabbed a chair and sat on it, looking at the sky. Sun Chun maintained his nonchalant expression, as if he had just saved the whole world. Clearly, it was hard to be a jerk. Suddenly, he said he would protect this place. It seemed he was very serious about it. Meanwhile, the helicopter landed on the ground and was distributing humanitarian aid. That girl who was taking notes in the shelter asked Mr. Reporter if he would be filming and broadcasting, but the man wasn't sure. The transmission was unstable, and the camera was old. He was just there to film the helicopter. And when the transmission was possible, the radio would turn on immediately. After that, the helicopter flew back. The people who had gone to help that girl left, and she thanked them and was going to check if the warehouse doors were closed. She was so tired, really. She wanted to rest in the usual way when suddenly her eyes widened. What did she see? She saw Kan Eon. She recognized him since the boy had suddenly disappeared and returned completely beaten up. A tree. Well, for starters, a worthy opponent. Kan Eon couldn't stop criticizing himself. This was terrible. He was so scared, he doubted himself. He was so weak. The same confidence, the same pride, but his body had completely weakened after the coma. His body was like it had been a week ago. Get angry? Be offended? What was he supposed to do? Right now, he was nobody. No, he had been nobody before. He had been fooling himself, thinking he was strong. But when Kan Eon realized he had no strength at all, fear engulfed him. Blood. He had given up and lay there almost dead. He couldn't do anything. No matter if the world had collapsed, his life had turned into nothing. That girl was still watching him and called him a fool. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the shelter. At the entrance, a man was sitting and reading a book, but someone's gaze wouldn't let him just be in silence. Kan Eon approached, covering his wounds with his clothes, but he still looked terrible. He came to the security commander, Huan Chang, who had been sent to him. The man stared at Kan Eon for a while. Then he asked if the boy had returned from the war because he looked like crap. It turned out that Huan Chang had seen Kan Eon walking with a cart back then. Now he looked better. He looked like he was about to die, according to the man. The boy ignored the man's words, repeated that he had been told to come to Huan Chang, and asked what he should do. But the commander told him to just find something to pass the time since he was guarding supplies from robbers. That was all. This upset the boy. A little earlier, that girl had approached him and said she had found Kan Eon's parents while watching the recordings. They were doing well. It turned out that the family was even planning to search for their son, but it was too dangerous to go out of the shelters, so they were forcibly moved elsewhere. Kan Eon suddenly jumped up and kept bowing to her. He was incredibly happy to hear that. She was initially surprised by such a reaction, but then realized it was her chance. She offered some work in exchange for help. The girl also noticed that Kan Eon had quickly recovered, despite his wounds. He had a lot of strength, so she asked him to join the security team. It turned out she had already informed the commander that Kan Eon would come, so she ordered him to go to the warehouse. In the end, the boy suddenly remembered something else. He asked her to find his friend, Kwan Rin. She asked if she was his girlfriend, but Kan Eon denied it, although his voice was uncertain. However, the girl promised to look for her when the radio started working. So, now Kang Eon was sitting by the warehouse watching Huan Chang read. Then the guys with the cargo arrived. They asked if the commander had eaten and offered to take over for him, but the man refused. After that, the men noticed the newcomer. Huan said Kang Eon was sent here, but he had nothing for him to do. The men also noticed that Kang looked pretty sickly, and then they suggested leaving Huan Chang alone since he liked solitude. Meanwhile, several hours had probably passed. Huan Chang was either asleep or trying out a new security technique. Kang Eon didn't leave the man's side for a moment. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore and suggested the commander go inside to rest, and Kang could cover for him. But Huan immediately refused and asked him to step away entirely. Kang Eon sat back in his spot, confused about who this man was. Suddenly, that crazy old man sat down next to him and said that Huan Chang was 39 years old and very mysterious. Kang Eon jumped at the sudden appearance. The old man acted as if he'd been asked something. He also asked how the boy was feeling, given his appearance. Still, Kang Eon decided to keep the conversation going. He was friendly and asked why Huan Chang spoke so little. But the old man only knew the commander's age. It turned out he had come a few months after the world shock. He looked like a hungry wolf and appeared just as suddenly as Kang Eon had a week ago. Huan Chang didn't talk to anyone and always ate alone in the corner. It was as if he didn't exist. He acted like a man who had given up on life. But then something happened after a month. About 10 robbers from the neighboring area arrived in trucks with weapons. Of course, the crazies would show up after the world had nearly collapsed. They could do nothing but watch as their food was taken for a month, and then Huan Chang slowly emerged, taking off his jacket. Just imagine, they hadn't noticed his existence for a month, and then suddenly he stepped up to defend. And what happened next? Mr. Park, who was smoking in the corner, said he hadn't even finished his cigarette before it was all over. He was quick, invisible, just like in hiding. Even knives and bats didn't help those scumbags. With each step, he took down one person. Just from the sounds, you could tell whose bones were breaking and who was calling for help. And when it was all over, he calmly tucked in his shirt, buttoned it up, and said, in his opinion, they should pay for the food. And then it all repeated. When the old man finished, he realized that Kang Eon didn't believe him. After all, there were many people here saying it was all just tales. After that incident, Huan Chang had taken down 2 more raids by himself. Some said he was the mafia boss. There were many theories, even that he was a North Korean spy. But still, the commander didn't want to talk about himself. The old man asked if anything in his story had struck a chord with Kang Eon. He wanted to write a book on the subject. Meanwhile, it had already grown dark. The scene shifted back to the school. A boy was resting on the grass, looking very cute. Tae-jun came by, calling for Gyeonmun. He told this chill guy that it had been a few days since the helicopter with humanitarian aid had arrived, and Gyeonmun hadn't done anything yet. He offered him his 2 partners. The boy said he had heard about Tae-jun's recent feat. He had robbed 2 old ladies and 2 dogs. So Gyeonmun didn't want those 2 idiots. They were too scared. The army was bringing supplies. There were a lot of people in hiding, and they were especially alert these days. They just needed to wait. Gyeonmun advised Tae-seon to try using his brain if he had one. The red-haired boy got really angry at such rudeness. Gyeonmun reminded him that just because he was hanging around Sun Chun didn't make him a commander. So he suggested Tae-jun go rob some more grandmas and kill dogs, since that was all he was capable of. Tae-jun just lost it. He yelled at that crazy scumbag to get up if he was done. Gyeonmun even took off his mask a bit and said that if he got up, then Taijon would lie down. That sounded like a challenge, but Gyeon-moon immediately calmed down and asked him not to block his sunlight. It was such a nice day. Meanwhile, night fell and the scene shifted to the hideout. Kang Yeon went to check on the old folks and asked Grandpa to stop refusing food. After all, he needed to have plenty of strength to take care of Grandma. That night, it was Kang Yeon's turn to guard the warehouse. He walked alone down the dark corridor. Suddenly, Kang Yeon noticed something. His body tensed, sensing danger. But it was just a dog, Rovachevsky. What was going on? Kang Yeon asked his friend to stay close to Grandma. He stopped and studied the face of his person closely, as if he really understood what they were saying. Kang Yeon just walked away. In just a few days, the emotions burning inside Kang Yeon finally cooled down. He found the longed-for peace. Kang Yeon was furious at his own weakness, and in the end, exploded. Yes, that was him. What was he supposed to do now? Kang Yeon thought it was time to calm down for a while. When the bus arrived, he could see his family. And Rin, he hoped she would be there. These thoughts brought a smile to his face, and it felt so warm all of a sudden. He was lost in such pleasant thoughts when Hwan Chang interrupted him, suddenly speaking. He wanted to step away for just 10 minutes. Kang Yeon looked around. He had never been left alone before. So he decided to take a stroll around the place he was guarding, wanting to peek inside. He even checked the lock. He approached his job very responsibly. But it seemed everything was under control. Suddenly, something caught Kang Yeon's attention. His eyes widened sharply and he said, "Wow, the moon. It was full and incredibly beautiful." Kang Yeon hoped that his mother and Rin had seen this beauty too. Suddenly, the sound of an engine was heard. Kang Yeon was on high alert. He knew very well what that sound meant. A truck was speeding in and just smashed through the lock and gates. At the same time, it knocked Kang Yeon off his feet. Everything happened too fast. The boy didn't even have time to dodge. Right after, another vehicle arrived and bandits jumped out of it. Gyeonmun stepped out and told his guys to move quickly because they had only 2 minutes. He ordered them to start pouring gasoline. Kang Yeon felt his clothes suddenly getting wet because they poured gasoline on him too. Gyeonmun asked who he was and advised him not to stand there like an idiot because it was going to get hot. Kang Yeon was confused. He had just begun to feel calm, but he didn't have the luxury of reacting slowly. The fire suddenly flared up right next to him. Kang Yeon barely managed to jump away. The bandits were already at the warehouse. They were well prepared. They had everything to break down the doors. So the bandits quickly grabbed all the supplies. It was really very easy. Kang Yeon didn't understand how everything was happening so fast. They had just arrived. Finally, he realized that his clothes were soaked in gasoline, so he was forbidden from going near the fire. Kang Yeon's mind finally started working. He took off his clothes, and he went into battle. Kang Yeon simply jumped over the fire and lunged at the idiot next to him. The boy fell to the ground in shock. His dumb face showed a perfect mix of displeasure and aggression. But Kang Yeon's triumph didn't last long because Gyeon-moon kicked him away at that moment. This guy was annoying him. Who did he think he was? Acting like a hero. Kang Yeon was struggling to speak. He hadn't even caught his breath yet, but he managed to order them to leave because none of this belonged to them. Gyeon-moon calmly said he hated when people tried to ruin his plans. They had planned this operation to have minimal witnesses, so he would prefer to avoid a fight and suggested Kang surrender. But it seemed Yeon had no idea what that word meant, and that was a shame. He had a lot of faith but little strength. Gyeon-moon realized he wasn't being listened to at all. If a fight couldn't be avoided, then Gyeon-moon had to show him otherwise that it wasn't worth ruining his plans. With just one move, he managed to knock Kang Yeon to the ground. He landed on his back and hit his head hard. Gyeon-moon threatened that Kang Yeon shouldn't even move, or he would be killed. That idiot in the yellow jacket looked at Kang Yeon with fear again. He recognized him. Meanwhile, Gyeon-moon's partners told him that everything was ready so they could leave. Suddenly, Gyeon-moon's body trembled. He looked down. Kang Yeon had latched onto his leg. He wasn't going to give up. The partners were already annoyed that Gyeon-moon was playing around with Kang Yeon for so long. Gyeon-moon saw that the fool was very determined, but that didn't matter because he promised to give him shocking memories. Suddenly, a book flew at that scumbag's head. Who dared to do that to him? It was Hwan Chang. He took off his jacket and simply asked them all to stop it, after which the commander unbuttoned his shirt. and told Kang Eon that he was just an idiot for sacrificing his life for some cargo. Gyeonmun seemed to tense up a bit, but hid it. He had heard a lot about Hwan Chang, and he suggested they fight. The commander was surprised that Gyeonmun was planning to fight him alone. But before he could get an answer, a bandit lunged at him. Gyeonmun said he could easily take him down himself. But something went wrong. He took Gyeonmun's hit, judo, as expected. After which Hwan Chang hit that scumbag in his dumb head. He flew back a good distance. The hit was really quick. After that, Hwan Chang turned to the rest, saying he would let them leave alive if they left the boxes. Then Gyeonmun pulled out something that looked like a gun, after which he shot suddenly. It was a taser. He hit Hwan Chang right in the chest. The commander didn't have time to react, and who could stand against a weapon? The commander fell immediately to the ground. Gyeonmun didn't miss the chance to hit the downed man, after which he immediately put on a casual face to hide the fact that he had been beaten, and if it weren't for the weapon, he wouldn't have won. At that moment, the rest of the people in hiding rushed out, awakened by all the shouting. But Gyeonmun was already by the truck, everything packed, and they were leaving. No one tried to stop them anymore. Everyone was hoping for the commander, but he had been defeated. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to the hideout. Inside, the boy was being helped. Kang Eon apologized, saying it was all his fault, but the others supported him, saying the main thing was that the boy survived. They told him they hadn't lost anything anyway. Kang Eon didn't understand. Hwan Chang repeated again that he was just an idiot risking his life for a couple of boxes of junk. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to the school, where the boys were already getting ready to eat and enjoy what they had stolen. But they quickly got disappointed when they realized they had just been handed some dishes. The boys carrying the boxes didn't even suspect anything when they carried such light boxes. Taeseon didn't miss the chance to praise Gyeonmun for a job well done and to check if his nose was hurting. He was shooed away. Taejeon was going to talk to the boss about it when suddenly that boy in the yellow jacket stopped him. He said in a trembling voice that he had seen him. Taejeon didn't understand. Then the idiot clarified that he was talking about the boy that scumbag had supposedly beaten to death. It turned out they had just imagined it. The boy started sweating heavily and trembling. He was scared to say it, but he swore he had seen Kang Eon with his own eyes. The scene shifted back to the hideout, where the boys explained to Kang Eon that they had set a trap for the looters. The supplies were stored elsewhere, but they should have warned the boy about it first. But that girl interrupted, saying now they would have problems with disposable dishes. But that was nothing. The main thing was that the boys were okay. The commander swore he was fine. No one could have imagined they would find a taser. Most likely the scumbags had robbed the police station, but if it weren't for the weapon, Hwan would have just taken them all down. Suddenly, she ordered everyone to shut up because the emergency news channel had finally started working. In 5 minutes, there would be a broadcast. The boys ran to the generator. Everyone sat around the only TV where it was reported that the country was in ruins. During the transport of cargo by helicopter, dozens of people needing help had been spotted. This distress signal was filmed above Ingung High School, which had been occupied by a gang of criminals. Inside, Kang Eon suddenly felt cold all over, because even though he had memory problems, he would recognize it even if he completely lost his memory. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to the school. There sat Taejeon thinking about Kang Eon. He was sure that Weakling was dead. He couldn't be alive. The boy suddenly became very aggressive, starting to smash furniture. This was impossible. He couldn't see him. He saw someone else. Taejeon's hands suddenly started trembling. He had to find that scumbag alive. The scene shifted back to the hideout. Hwan Chang returned to his post and saw Kang Eon there. The man was outraged because the boy should have been inside until he came to his senses. But Eon didn't respond. Then the commander spoke louder, but suddenly fell silent. The man barely touched Kang Eon and he just collapsed. Hwan Chang didn't understand what was happening. Kang Eon seemed to be in a trance. He heard nothing and no one. Because Rin, it was her, and she was there on the roof. Suddenly, he just got up and ran. Hwan Chang stood there for a moment, watching this crazy psycho. And then he just turned and walked away. This all meant that Rin hadn't been able to evacuate. But why was she still there? Did something happen at the school? But she had been captured. Was she a prisoner there? Maybe there were other students too? Kang Eon had to check. Rin, wait, he was getting close. Kang Yeon quickly made his way to the school. There was security, of course, but they were asleep. Still, Kang Yeon had to be careful. He couldn't understand how it had come to this. The school looked like a bandit hideout. The guards stood at both entrances. How was he supposed to get in? What was he supposed to do? How was he going to save Rin? Kang Yeon was so lost in these thoughts that he completely forgot to be cautious. He should have been more alert and kept an eye on the situation. Kang Yeon could barely make out who it was through the bright light shining in his eyes. It was Taijin. He started shouting and asking how Kang Yeon had survived. It turned out he wanted to check if it was true, but what the hell was this idiot doing here on his turf? Before Taijin could finish his sentence, Kang Yeon suddenly yanked his hand away from him. He said he had definitely killed Kang Yeon last time, but this time he would finish the job. However, the opponent was very calm, just looking around. Taijin was annoyed. He wanted to be feared. Didn't Kang Yeon hear him? Why was he just standing there? But it seemed no one was planning to run or be scared. Kang Yeon took off his bandage and asked if Taijin had come alone. The bandit didn't understand anything, but Kang Yeon continued. After which, the boy simply snatched the flashlight from that scumbag, which had been blinding him. Suddenly, Taijin's voice changed. There was fear in it? Kang Yeon realized that the bandit hadn't taken anything else besides that flashlight. After which, a punch flew into his dumb face. Blood immediately splattered everywhere. Taijin hadn't expected Kang Yeon to strike first. Finally, he had some guts. He tried to hit Kang Yeon back several times, but Taijin couldn't land a single hit. Although Kang Yeon didn't show it, he seemed to have become much stronger. But in reality, his body wasn't what it used to be. His muscles had weakened. He was still too weak. He couldn't defeat Taijin with brute force. Finally, Taijin took the initiative. He even managed to hit Kang Yeon. Taijin threw him into a trash can. It amused him, although it seemed that the laughter was forced to regain his power. After which, he grabbed the radio and told everyone to come to him, giving his location. Now Taijin thought he was in a good position, as he understood perfectly that he was strong only when attacking the weaker ones with his idiots. Suddenly, Kang Yeon struck Taijin from a spin. That scumbag didn't expect the hit at all. So he dropped the radio. Kang Yeon simply smashed it. The little boy was seriously angry. What was he supposed to do now? After which, Kang Yeon began hitting Taijin again and again in his dumb face, until he cornered the scumbag. Taijin couldn't believe all this was happening. He was just powerless. Kang Yeon asked that scumbag what had happened at the school. He started shouting, "What had they done?" Meanwhile, the events shifted to the school itself. The power was still out. Rin wanted to take a little walk. Her friend begged her not to go anywhere because someone might see her. But Rin didn't understand. They weren't prisoners. It was just a night stroll to help her sleep better. But at the same time, Rin had to keep looking around and be careful, especially when she passed by the boys' dorm. Were they okay? Did they really want to stay at school just because it was dangerous outside? That couldn't be true. At the very least, she needed to know what was happening out there. But as she stepped outside, a guard stopped her and asked where she thought she was going. That question annoyed her. Was he going to spy on them now? The guard insisted it wasn't spying at all. They were just protecting them. But Rin found that infuriating. Who were they to decide if she needed protection? But according to the guy, most had agreed to the protection. But what about those who were against it? What if Rin wanted to go outside right now? Would he stop her? The guard argued that it was dangerous out there, but how could she know if she had never been there? He stood firm, saying everyone had gone through a lot and needed rules to make life safe. Rin realized the guard sounded just like Sun. All the guys were getting drunk on the power they had. But either way, she wasn't going to put up with it. She was going outside. The guard tried to stop her, but completely forgot that Rin was an athlete, so he quickly got slapped. From what she could see, all they were trying to do was build their own kingdom to rule over them. Suddenly, the guard heard Taijin on the radio calling for his mom for help. Rin asked if he wasn't going to help, but it turned out that wasn't part of his job. All he was supposed to do was protect the girls. So he told Rin to go to bed. Meanwhile, the events shifted outside. There, Taijin found the strength to hit Kaneon. He had already forgotten what it was like to fight fair. He even managed to throw the guy off him. After that, Taijin grabbed a brick, realizing his fists weren't going to cut it. Now that jerk felt good. He was smashing Kaneon with the brick over and over, wishing for his death. Honestly, it was tough for Kanion too. His whole body was shaking, and he could barely hold on. But something kept pushing him to fight on. He didn't expect this from himself. Khan took the initiative. He could clearly see Tyson's movements and knew how to counterattack, but his body, it just wouldn't let him. But Khan Eon wouldn't give in to that jerk Tyson anymore. With every hit, he felt more confident. He finally understood his own strength. But even so, it wasn't enough to keep him on his feet. But this was the end. He had won. He had beaten Tyson. Khan Eon told Tyson to pull himself together and tell him what had been happening at school all this time. His voice was filled with anger, feeling all the rage that came from those suspicions. Unfortunately, the triumph didn't last long. The big guy asked Kanion who he was. It turned out he recognized Min Daewon, another classmate. The big guy hadn't recognized Kanion at first, but the longer he thought about his face, the more familiar it seemed. Meanwhile, the events shifted back to the school. Rin was heading back after a good slap. She realized she couldn't just sit there not knowing anything about the rest of the world. Even if she had to convince the others, Rin would do it. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted when someone grabbed her by the arm. Honestly, she got pretty scared, but it was just a teacher, and she was about to plead with Rin not to do this and just stay. Because according to her, the world outside was scary and dangerous. The girls behind her confirmed the teacher's words. They all believed they were safe in school and that the boys were protecting them. But why did Rin have so many doubts then? Meanwhile, Kanion had learned to fly. Oh no, it was just Min Daewon. Ion, as always, quickly got back up, never falling or feeling sorry for himself. He was his own harshest critic. Khan realized he simply couldn't fight against this big bull. But still, as you might have guessed, brains weren't his strong suit. Obviously, Min Daewon immediately stopped Khan Eon's attack. But honestly, it wasn't that hard. Khan Eon had just confirmed his suspicions that he wouldn't be able to fight against him. He wasn't even listening to what Min Daewon was saying. All he could think about was Rin. She was at school. What was he supposed to do? That jerk was too strong, but Kanion still couldn't give up. Suddenly, a voice in his head asked him what he was doing and why he wasn't running away from a fight he clearly couldn't win. Meanwhile, above the poor guy loomed the big guy, who now remembered Kanion. But honestly, that didn't scare him. He looked around, trying to figure out what was that? But for some reason, Kanion believed that voice. And he suddenly ran away from Min Daewon. The big guy wanted to stop him, but he wasn't really that interested. Khan Eon couldn't think of anything else. What was that? Who was that? Had he completely lost his mind? In any case, Khan Eon couldn't do anything about it. He promised himself he would come back when he was stronger and healthier. Khan Eon even managed to look back to see if anyone was chasing him. But he got distracted for too long and didn't see what was right in front of him. For some unknown reason, Kinyan just fell off his bike. His body hurt. He could barely get up. He wanted to see what had caused him to lose control. He was ready to see anything, but definitely not the answer to his questions. What the hell? The voice spoke again. This time it asked if Khan Eon understood it. What? The guy didn't understand anything at all. The robot said that specimen number 19 had made similar mistakes before due to bodily difficulties, so he was deemed unfit for further observation. The robot was about to initiate the termination procedure. Khan Eon tried to stop the robot, wanting to say something else, but he didn't have time. The robot suddenly shot up off the ground, causing Khan Eon to fall from the intense pressure. Now the guy had even more questions. Meanwhile, morning had arrived. A new day, new opportunities. Everything at school was as usual. The cool guys were stuffing their faces with what they had stolen. Sun Chun told Gyeonmun not to make that face, because it happened. He could take someone from the strike team if he needed people. But Gyeonmun had had enough of his guys. Then Shiyun intervened, saying that his partner had been acting like a wuss lately, and that failure was proof. Then Sun Chun jumped in, telling the big guy to shut his stinking mouth, because Gyeon played an important role and shouldn't be forgotten over one failure, which was just an accident, all because of that guy who kept tripping over everyone. Then he asked the two guys standing at the entrance to bring more kimchi and water. After that, he asked Tyson what was up with his face. The boss realized he had gotten his butt kicked. Even though that beaten dog tried to deny it, he was failing miserably at controlling his trembling voice. So Tyson made up a story about running into some guys from another gang. There were 3 of them, and he beat them all. Sweat was streaming down his face treacherously. Then Shion jumped in, not believing that other gangs still existed, which made Tyson explode with aggression. No one believed him. At that moment, water was brought in. Tyson kept lying, but Shion didn't buy it. Then that idiot Tyson suddenly stood up and couldn't think of anything better than to challenge Shion to a fight. But he was saved from his mistake by the poor guy who brought the water. Tyson noticed that idiot laughing, and it seemed like it was at him. The conversation was interrupted by Min Daewong, who had been silent about what had happened to Tyson. He asked Sun Chun how things were outside, as he had heard that some particularly curious folks had shown up and didn't want to stay in their shelter. They saw a helicopter and now thought it was safe out there. The boss suggested reminding all the ungrateful ones what happened during the global shock. The whole world fell apart. Had they forgotten that? Sun Chun laughed out loud. Shelter? Protection from the government? They only brought more problems. Someday things would be normal again. But until then, the boss promised to protect the rest from danger. They all had to remember that. The guys were motivated by this. They agreed they were doing a really good job and were the main support of the school. Then Tyson stood up and left. He had lost his appetite. Because that jerk had awakened an appetite for aggression. He turned to that nerdy guy waiting in the hallway. Tyson pulled out a fork and pressed it to the poor guy's throat. He tried to apologize, but there was no avoiding the fight. After all, that jerk couldn't stand that someone had dared to laugh in his presence. His self-esteem was rock bottom. At that moment, Sun Chun walked out and wanted to know what was going on. The boss started scolding Tyson, saying they didn't have enough workers as it was, and that idiot wanted to turn the help into vegetables. The nerd exhaled and thanked Sun Chun with a trembling voice, but the boss wasn't really that gentle. He ordered that loser to stand up straight. He didn't follow the command the first time. After that, Sun Chun just punched him in the stomach. The poor guy fell and trembled in pain. The boss ordered him to get up. Did he really think his captain was an idiot? Did Tyson seem funny to him if he was going to protect his back? The nerd apologized again, but Sun Chun didn't like that. He wanted better apologies. So the poor guy apologized again to Tyson, bowed to him, but that jerk didn't appreciate it. Meanwhile, the events shifted to the shelter. Huan Chang came for breakfast, just like everyone else. Everyone was friendly to the commander. People loved him and always thanked him for the food he had protected. Honestly, the commander didn't find it very pleasant. Suddenly, he noticed Kanyeon's dog. Huan Chang realized the animal wanted to tell him something. So the man just followed the dog, which was even running with its broken legs. Honestly, Huan Chang was already annoyed that everyone had been bothering him since morning. He looked around. But when he realized what was going on, chills ran down his spine. Huan Chang exhaled heavily and told the dog that the only thing that boy brought him was a headache. Meanwhile, the events shifted back to the shelter. Kanyeon finally came to his senses, not understanding where he was at that moment. Huan Chang asked if it was a habit of the boys to always come back half dead, but Kanyeon didn't understand anything. What was that? What had happened? He only remembered bumping into someone while running. Was it just a dream? The boy got up and apologized to the commander, saying he probably fell down the stairs at night, and thanked him for taking care of him. But Huan Chang didn't understand why he should care about that idiot. It turned out this was his bed. He was hiding here from the rest of the people. After that, the commander ordered Kanyeon to get out of his bed since he still had to stand guard at night. The boy quickly complied, but Huan Chang stopped that idiot at the last moment and asked if he liked being a punching bag and advised Kanyeon to start training. Ha! He even made up a story about the stairs, but just by looking at him, it was clear he had been in a few wars. Huan Chang didn't know if it was a superpower to cheat death or just plain luck. The commander didn't wait for an answer and asked the boy to close the curtain behind him. Kanyeon was left alone with his thoughts. On his way, he ran into that girl who asked what the boy had been doing if he had come back barely alive again, but she didn't wait for an answer and said the bus would arrive in a few days. But Kanyeon didn't have a ticket for it, so she registered him as injured, since there was hardly anyone in the shelter who had suffered more than Kanyeon. She said all he had to do was get to the main shelter. It was his chance to live near his family in a safer place. After that, the girl left, and Kanyeon barely managed to process all the information that had been thrown at him so suddenly. The boy realized it was a miracle he had come out of a coma. But what could he do with such a weak body? It would be nice to find people in the shelter who could help him. because doing everything by himself was impossible. Meanwhile, night fell. Kan Eon was shocked that the commander wouldn't leave, but he had long agreed to stay in this shelter until everyone was evacuated since he wasn't injured. The boy didn't stop and wanted to know where Huan Chang's family was. Weren't they in the main shelter? The commander replied indifferently that when the world was in such a state, it was better for him to stay here and do everything he could. Moreover, he didn't have a family. No matter how hard the man tried to hide his sadness, his voice changed. Kan Eon suddenly felt cold. Chills ran down his spine, and he apologized to the commander. Huan Chang couldn't stand pity for himself. He ordered him to stop talking and just get on the bus the next day to spend time with his family. Kan Eon agreed, but at night he couldn't sleep because of all those thoughts. What about Rin? His Rin. She was at school. Tyson, Daewong. Who else was left there? The guy who stole food? Geon Moon? Had the gang completely taken control of the school? And their leader was Sun Chun. Those jerks had ruined Kan Eon's life, and they kept causing him problems even after the end of the world. Meanwhile, morning arrived. Kan Eon was out for a run first thing in the morning. He could barely stand on his feet, let alone do cardio. The boy was furious. His blood was boiling. Why? Did he want revenge? Or was he worried about Rin? It was hard. He didn't understand what this feeling was. What did he want? What are you going to do, Kan Eon? Get a grip, idiot. The boy kept telling himself that, because right now he couldn't do anything. Huan Chang noticed this. He stepped out for a quiet coffee in the morning, and here was some idiot hitting a tree. Meanwhile, lunchtime arrived. A line of people stood by the exit, waiting for the bus. The leader announced to everyone that the bus was about to arrive, so he asked the team leaders to check if everyone from their group was present. Kan Eon rushed to Huan Chang at the last second. He bowed to the commander and thanked him for everything and for taking the dog in. To which Huan Chang told the boy not to waste his breath. Kan Eon ignored that remark and simply said goodbye to his dog. The boy returned to the bus and tried to convince himself that this was for the best. The military was already on site, so he could look for other options. Meanwhile, enough time had passed, and it was starting to get dark. Huan Chang sat with the dog, reading as usual. Suddenly, Robachevsky started whining. The commander was even rough and cold with animals, so he told the dog he wasn't his owner and ordered him not to whine. The dog lay back down as if it understood the man. Suddenly, Robachevsky's ears perked up. He heard something. Huan Chang listened too, and saw Kan Eon in front of him. The bus had already left, so the commander asked what that idiot was doing here. The boy started his speech by saying he had done various sports when he was younger. It didn't matter if it was boxing, judo, or karate. He had been a decent fighter before he fell into a coma. Huan Chang didn't understand why he was being told all this. Kan Eon ignored the coldness and continued that now his body was weak. He was training hard to get back in shape. Huan Chang continued to feign indifference, asking him to get to the point. Kan Eon gathered himself and asked him to teach him how to fight. A few months ago, 5:45 p.m., they had promised it would rain, but most likely it was just dark outside. People were living their usual lives. A beautiful day. Such a happy and carefree past. No one even expected something terrible would happen, that it would be the end of the world. But even then, there were bad guys who disturbed people's peaceful lives. Men fought over trivial matters because they didn't know how to talk and use their mouths for their intended purpose. Meanwhile, the events shifted back to the school. The chemistry teacher was just closing his classroom. Nothing unusual, everything as always. Suddenly, he noticed something strange. There was a spider web in the corner of the hallway. He thought it was just the school's negligence. But then, his thoughts were interrupted by foreign female voices. In the classroom sat the girls. Rin was there, and the teacher asked what they were doing. It turned out the students were just helping their homeroom teacher. He had promised the girls he would buy them something to eat. The teacher then asked Rin how she was doing in school, as he had heard her grades had dropped. He asked if it was because of her friend who had fallen into a coma. Rin mentioned the name Kan Eon and said he was almost okay and would wake up soon. Suddenly, the chemistry teacher placed his hand on Rin's shoulder and said she could always come to him if something was bothering her. The old perv turned all red and asked her to think of him as a father figure, adding that she could always come to him. Meanwhile, the homeroom teacher Yun rushed in with food. Teacher Pak said Yun could have just ordered pizza, but the teacher wanted the discount that was only available for pickup. After that, The homeroom teacher abruptly and a bit roughly pulled Mr. Pak away from the girls and treated them to pizza. The chemistry teacher was outraged that Teacher Yun hadn't even bought anything for the kids. Then the girls shouted in unison that everything was fine and they would eat anyway. However, Teacher Yun didn't understand the problem and gathered them in a circle, even though the girls said they wanted to go themselves. Well, they were stuck with that strange old man again. Mr. Pak was surprised how such a scatterbrained person could become a teacher. Teacher Yun hurried down the stairs, nearly bumping into the guard. They exchanged pleasantries. The guard asked if any other teachers were left, and Teacher Yun told him about the girls and Mr. Pak. The guard smiled strangely and said it must be nice to be young, with so much energy in Yun. After that, he went off to patrol the school. He peeked into the choir class. Such sweet students, the guard thought. Suddenly, something caught his attention. He saw it through the window, but everything looked fine outside. He immediately headed down the stairs, following his usual route. However, something did happen after all. The guard burst into the storage room, shouting about what was going on and why they were all still here instead of going home. Inside, a gang of those punks was lounging around, and they didn't even react when the guard walked in. Tyson responded to the guard's outrage by saying they were just chatting and would leave soon, but the guard stood firm, insisting they couldn't be here. He ordered them to go home. Then another gang member chimed in, telling the old man not to worry about it since they'd be leaving shortly. Then that cheeky guy asked if he should tell the guard's father that the guard was rudely interrupting his son's conversations with friends. The old man felt powerless. He asked the guys to wrap it up and stop smoking, promising to come back and check. At that, the guys burst into laughter, and Tyson remarked how cool it must be to be the son of a politician, asking if he could be his brother. Then Tyson turned to the workers and asked if they thought he'd make a good son in a politician's family. But the guys stayed silent. They were nearly naked, and their silence irritated the punk. He was annoyed that those losers had gotten so brazen lately and stopped fearing them. Then the politician's son jumped in, adding that those idiots completely ignored him when he called them out in the hallway last week. After that, the kid exploded and started hitting those poor guys, saying just thinking about them drove him crazy. He turned to Sun Chun and asked why he hadn't kept those losers on a short leash, given how horribly they were behaving. But the kid didn't respond, he just looked away. Tyson tried to calm the politician's son down, defending Sun Chun by saying it was his mistake. Then he asked the bespectacled kid if he had gone to the hospital to check on Kanyeon. Tyson leaned closer to the poor guy and asked if he felt sad that they had turned Kanyeon into a vegetable and if he wanted to end up like that too. The bespectacled kid trembled as he replied that the boy hadn't woken up. The kid couldn't hold back his tears, adding that Kanyeon hadn't come to after Tyson beat him. And that was a mistake. The punk grabbed the kid by the hair and yelled at him not to lie and to tell the truth that Kanyeon fell on his own. They were just victims here. Tyson threatened him to never hear such nonsense from them again. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the computer lab. Mr. Pak asked Rin to help him. He wanted her to hold the ladder while he cleaned the cobwebs. Her friend jumped in, saying they could handle it themselves and the teacher could rest in the classroom. But Mr. Pak was outraged. It was dangerous. What if they both got hurt? Then Rin said she'd change into gym clothes and do it. But the teacher started getting mad, saying at this rate, he'd be stuck at school all night. He grabbed Rin's hand and reminded her that she thought of him as a father and just needed to clear the cobwebs. He swore she could trust him. A chill ran down Rin's spine. Her legs felt like jelly, and she couldn't move or say a word. At that moment, Teacher Yun rushed in and started yelling at Mr. Pak. What was he thinking? But the old man started playing the victim, not understanding why he was being yelled at. They were just cleaning cobwebs. He even asked Rin to confirm that nothing was going on. However, Teacher Yun wasn't an idiot. He grabbed that punk by the arm and threatened him not to come near the kids again. Teacher Pak tried to argue, but his points were as weak as he was. Just as this situation was about to resolve, an earthquake suddenly struck. In the shock, no one reacted in time. The gang also panicked. Dogs outside went wild. And right after that, a strong earthquake hit, causing chaos. Those men arguing by the cafe, suddenly all their problems seemed trivial. Windows shattered in the school, debris flew toward the kids. Finally, they started to flee when they somewhat understood what was happening. The whole world plunged into an atmosphere of panic and chaos. By 6:08 p.m., the world had turned into an apocalypse. After that, unidentified flying objects appeared. They multiplied, but they just flew in the sky. Everyone was in a frenzy. Even those who should have been protecting people needed protection themselves. Suddenly, those flying saucers began attacking the ground. They dropped something strange that looked like a ballistic bomb. The students and teachers who had just hidden in the school found themselves directly threatened by that thing as it was heading straight for the school. The gang of boys was also in the line of fire. Everyone was scared, and no one understood what was happening. However, this was the last time Rin was outside. The object landed near them. Meanwhile, night fell, and events shifted back to reality. Sun Chun was walking with one of his partners, who complained about how tired he was and wanted to go to sleep. Choi Hyun was on the school duty, and the boss asked how he was doing. They exchanged a few phrases, and the boss moved on. Choi Hyun thought about Sun Chun. He was already the leader of the gang, but now he was the leader of the whole school. It seemed he didn't like it much, especially if it weren't for that incident. No one would even remember him or his gang. And then Choi Hyun drifted into memories. He had been into sports, seriously committed to it since childhood. The training ended, and Choi Hyun, as always, went to change. Nothing unusual except for his expression, a sad look. He stared at a photo, him, Rin, and Eon. They used to be friends. Choi Hyun felt so sad. He desperately wanted Kan Eon to wake up. Leaving the gym, Choi Hyun firmly decided he couldn't delay any longer and needed to visit Kan Eon. Suddenly, his thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice that sparked instant disgust within him. That gang was calling the athlete over, offering him a cigarette. But obviously, Choi Hyun wasn't interested. He knew Kan Eon had problems with those guys, so they were likely the ones who did this to him. Suddenly, an earthquake began. Choi Hyun fell to the ground but reacted faster than the rest. He just saw the moment when an unidentified flying object flew toward the school. After that, an explosion. The boy saw the old guard barely holding on. It looked like he had fallen hard and hurt himself. The well-mannered kid couldn't just walk past. Choi Hyun wanted to help the guard escape, but the man said there were still students left in the school. For him, it was like a command that he had to help the rest. Choi Hyun left the old man and immediately ran toward the school. There, the gang was already ready to kick someone's butt. Suddenly, a robot that looked very human emerged from the unidentified object. Sun Chun's voice suddenly trembled, and he ordered everyone to run. Then he shouted louder, repeating for everyone to flee. The robot looked around, surveying the room. After that, it walked straight ahead, very calmly. At that moment, Choi Hyun rushed to help his friends. The students were just exiting the classroom. Rin, her friend, teacher Yoon, and the pervert were hiding under the desks in the classroom. Suddenly, Mr. Pak spoke up, the one everyone had distanced themselves from, saying it wasn't an earthquake because during an earthquake, the ground shakes differently. Then they decided to flee. Teacher Yoon ordered the old man to go first to check the building. At that moment, they encountered the choir on the stairs. The gang was approaching them. Some even managed to talk along the way. Suddenly, Sun Chun stopped, because in front of them was a dead end. They couldn't go anywhere. The stairs were destroyed. Then Sun Chun commanded everyone to head to the back entrance. Tyson, like a true coward, started whining that maybe that exit was blocked too. On the stairs, they met the rest. Teacher Yoon yelled for that gang to turn back, but Tyson managed to inform them about the blockage. Choi Hyun said the back door was clear since he had come through there. The students decided to flee that way. It seemed that at that moment, they all united. But it wasn't that simple. Sun Chun's body suddenly felt weak, and some delicate parts of him tightened. Fear. It was him. The boy froze, trying to compose himself so as not to show any emotions. Because in front of them was it. Tyson, being foolish, climbed into that machine first and started threatening. After that, the rest of the not-so-bright gang members joined in. Amidst the shouting, Sun Chun tried to figure out what was happening and what he should do. Suddenly, the robot's hand shot up, scaring all those tough guys. Sun Chun barely held back a scream. The robot's hand was aimed right at them, and it didn't look friendly. Suddenly, a very strong and sharp gust of wind hit, causing everyone else to fall. Debris flew into the students' faces. Everyone suddenly froze, waiting to see what would happen next. No one dared to speak to the robot anymore. Suddenly, some parts of its body began to hiss. After that, a terrifying face of the robot appeared, and it said for those tough guys to attack it, and it would destroy them. Local life forms are weak. Tyson started screaming like a little girl, that voice. It echoed in his head. The robot said that risk identification was to be removed. Local creatures had to follow instructions. Despite the fact that humans were weak, The robot couldn't deny that their race had something resembling intelligence. After that, this terrifying and evil thing warned them, threatening that it would only give one warning: they should surrender. Although the robot positioned itself as a super-intelligent being, it got so caught up in its speech that it didn't notice when it was attacked from behind. Sun Chun somehow found a shovel and lunged at the invader. Everyone else was shocked. No one expected that from a mama's boy. So the boss had to yell at the rest to start acting and attacking the robot. Only then did his boys leap at the monster, holding it down on the floor while Sun Chun struck. The boss's voice grew more and more deranged. He was completely losing it. He enjoyed what he was doing. Suddenly, the robot's hand shot out and went right through Sun Chun's body. The boy felt a sharp pain in his abdomen, blood pouring from him. But that didn't stop Sun Chun. It only fueled the fire more. Now he only wished for the robot's death. So with all his might, he lunged at the invader, crushing its head. The rest held their breath. What they saw was horrifying. No matter how anyone felt about Sun Chun, seeing death up close, you wouldn't wish that on your enemy. And from that moment on, Sun Chun became their leader, whom no one could deny or oppose. Meanwhile, events shifted back to reality and moved to the shelter. Kenyon had been following Huang Chang all morning, asking him to teach him martial arts, so he could return to the place filled with people who wanted to kill him. The teenager wanted to justify himself, but Huang Chang interrupted, suggesting that Kenyon either wanted to save a friend or take revenge on someone, or both. After that, the commander added that he didn't care because he wasn't planning to teach him anything anyway. Kenyon didn't understand anything. After all, Huang Chang had asked him to come to this place, to which the commander replied that he hated doing things that annoyed him. Dealing with others was even worse. And now the boy wanted to drag him into both of those matters. But then Huang Chang realized how stubborn Kenyon was, and he understood that Kenyon wouldn't give up. The commander guessed that the boy planned to pester him for months even after being refused. Kenyon didn't know what to say. Huang Chang made his conclusion. He decided to dedicate 10 minutes of his time to Kenyon, but no more. Kenyon had to try to knock the commander off his feet, and only after that would the man consider the idea of training him. Kenyon silently thought. Then Huang Chang reassured him, saying he wouldn't resist too much, but if he didn't do anything in those 10 minutes, he'd have to leave on the next bus. The boy understood. This was serious, and he didn't want to risk such an opportunity. Kenyon gathered all his strength and willpower, and he was determined to do everything in those unfortunate 10 minutes. He stepped closer to Huang Chang, who didn't even take a stance. The boy made the first strike, which missed. Of course, the commander dodged. In response, he kicked Kenyon. The teenager fell and screamed in pain. It seemed Huang Chang wasn't planning to go easy on him at all. That was just a guess, but it was confirmed when Kenyon got hit in the face by the commander the next second. Huang Chang started by saying the boy was too slow. He asked why Khan was fighting. When the world was in such a state, did he really think he was the only one with problems? The commander heard that Kenyon was worried about whether his family was safe, so why didn't he go to them? He didn't even know what happened while the boy was in the hospital. So why get involved in all these problems he had at all? Meanwhile, events shifted back to the past. Throughout the city, calls echoed to go to the nearest shelter. An ambulance arrived at the hospital. The doctors complained to the rescuers that they still had patients unconscious and promised to take care of everyone. At that moment, Kenyon's mother and uncle rushed in, crying and begging to find their son. The rescuers promised to take care of it, but they wouldn't let the parents into the building. Everyone was ordered to get on the bus, but the mother and uncle stood their ground. They didn't believe and didn't want to leave the hospital because they knew they wouldn't see their son again after this. The uncle understood they couldn't do anything. Everyone was against them, and no one cared about their boy. After that, the man suddenly stood up and ran toward the hospital. He ordered his wife to go first. The uncle pushed through the crowd of rescuers blocking the way. No one could stop him. Finally, he made it into the building, running down the hallway and shouting, thinking Kenyon would wake up from the loud sounds. He didn't care about anything. He didn't see the walls and ceiling of the hallway collapsing and falling on him. Because of this, the man didn't hear that someone was running after him, and eventually a heavy object hit his head. As a result, he lost consciousness and simply fell to the ground. The rescuers had a chance to grab and take the uncle. He had just come to, and all he could do was call out for Eon, hoping he would be found. Meanwhile, events shifted back to the school. Hostages of circumstance were hiding and trembling, waiting for it all to end. After all, everyone had scattered, and the two poor souls being bullied were left behind. They were simply forgotten. Homyeon, the one with glasses, took charge and urged them to flee quickly, even though his partner was still trembling and barely keeping up. He hadn't even had time to get dressed again when the boys had already stepped out into the hallway. Suddenly, Homyeon stopped short. His partner didn't understand what had happened. His anxiety suddenly spiked. They had arrived just as Son Chun killed the robot. For a second, everything froze as if the corridor was engulfed in a feeling of death and primal fear. Events returned to reality, where Sun Chun was walking down the same corridor. His wound had already healed, but it still hurt and reminded him of those horrific events. The boss passed by Homyeon, who, out of habit, was sweating profusely at the sight of this tyrant. Sun Chun startled the worker, calling out to him and asking if he had seen Tyson, asking him to tell him to come to the boss. Homyeon exhaled in relief. He was genuinely terrified of his master, knowing just how capable this monster was. To confirm his thoughts, Seong Chun yelled at the poor guy for taking too long to stand up. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the shelter. Rovachevsky was watching everything unfold with keen interest. Even the dog didn't know what to do. Should he protect his master or not? After all, right now, Kang Yeon was very warmly receiving Huang Chang's punches. But it wasn't all bad. The commander even praised the kid. It was clear he had done various sports. Yeon had good posture and stance, and wasn't flailing his fists like an idiot. Yet, under these circumstances, Huang thought that going to school alone was like signing his own death warrant. Before he could finish that thought, Yeon just stood up, even though he had been barely breathing moments ago. The commander's jaw dropped. With a trembling body, Kang stood up and proudly declared that his 10 minutes weren't up yet, although the commander was sure they had long since finished. However, Kang Yeon was very persistent, or maybe just a foolish idiot. He never gave up and always fought to the last. Somehow this guy made it to his senior year of high school. Huang Chang couldn't hold back and asked why Yeon was still trying. Did he really want to learn to fight? Or was he just treating it like another sport? After all, if the commander remembered correctly, Yeon wanted to learn to fight to win. But then Huang didn't understand why the kid treated it like a sport. Suddenly, Yeon shouted and lunged at the commander. It might have seemed like the kid had gone mad. Huang intercepted the attack, commenting that Yeon was weak. After that, he punched the kid in the stomach, adding that he had too many weak spots. The commander posed logical questions. What would Yeon do if the opponent was weak but fast? Would he stick close and overpower him? And what if it was the opposite, strong but slow? Would Yeon hit quickly and run? According to him, that's how sports worked. The kid had to match the weight class, stick to the rules. But in a real fight, everything was different. Opponents would be faster and stronger, and they would use all kinds of dirty tricks against Yeon. How was he planning to win in that case? The kid seemed to muster all his strength to say that was exactly why he asked the commander to teach him to fight. Huang didn't understand why he should teach a kid who took fighting so lightly. That's why he couldn't teach Yeon. He would only make things worse if he stepped into a ring that was beyond his capabilities. After that, the commander left, shouting over his shoulder that was it. Yeon was not to bother him about this anymore. But as you might have guessed, Yeon was foolish, so he lunged at the commander again, shouting. Huang was so tired of beating the poor kid, but the kid just didn't get it. He advised him not to shout before throwing a punch. Also, the commander knew Yeon's moves, and the kid had to act like he wanted to kill Huang. Rovachevsky didn't know what to do. The poor dog was trembling with fear. Huang exhaled heavily and declared that Yeon had failed. But in reality, Kang didn't understand this. How did the commander expect him to fight? That's why he was supposed to learn from a master. Suddenly, it was as if the kid found a second wind. His heart raced like crazy. He didn't understand where all this adrenaline was coming from. Then suddenly, memories came flooding back. He remembered what it was like to fight unfairly and dirty, and that kind of fight always won. A sharp surge of aggression filled every inch of his body. He wasn't done yet. Huang exhaled again and said he knew Yeon would act like this, but he didn't get to finish his sentence because Yeon hit him? The commander certainly didn't see that coming. This kid just hit him. And then again, he used a dirty trick he learned from Huang himself. The commander was taken aback by the surprise. He saw that look. Yeon truly wished him dead, and it sent a chill down his spine. Huang fell to the ground. For a second, time seemed to stop. Above him hung a flower pot that Yoon was holding. Suddenly, the kid's face and mood shifted. Doubt appeared. Huang just waited, and he waited. Kang Yan threw the flower pot at the commander with all his strength and hatred. He forgot all the pain and fatigue he felt just a moment ago. Then suddenly, the kid realized what he had done, and he felt ashamed. But instead, Huang said that Yan had passed the test. Finally, the teenager could breathe a sigh of relief. When Kang Yan thought everything over with a clear head, he realized that even when he was in his best shape, he had never been the best. He had participated in many competitions, but he was always just okay. By the end of middle school, he doubted whether he should continue training. But in high school, everything changed. In 3 years, he had to grow up and seriously consider his career choice. Kang Yan was just texting Rin. She was shocked that this idiot decided to quit sports. That's when he decided to study and focus on his education. If only he had known. One day, Taesik started bothering him. He didn't like that Yeon was reading a book during break. The jerk was sure Yeon knew about him, but that wasn't the case. Taesik didn't hesitate to ask if his classmate had some money, promising to pay him back next week. Kang Yeon knew that in such cases he needed to stay calm, so he simply refused that idiot, saying he had nothing. He believed that if he kept his cool, Taesik would back off, and it worked. However, he advised Yeon to remember the jerk's name if he wasn't planning to challenge him. On the very first day, Yeon nearly died laughing at the childish things Taesik was up to. He told everyone to step forward if they wanted to challenge him. Although that jerk backed off from Yeon, he still had to get some money. So he went to the cowardly Homyeon. Just don't stick your neck out and don't get involved with jerks. It should have been easy. So now, as Kang Yeon started studying, his knowledge improved significantly, and he even got the results he wanted on the test. He just had to keep going, and he would achieve his goals. But it wasn't that simple. Suddenly, he was attacked. But calm down, it was just Rin. His friend was completely surprised that Yeon's stomach was still firm, considering he hadn't trained for months. But it turned out the teenager had continued training at his uncle's gym. Then Rin suggested checking if her friend still had abs, which made Yeon feel embarrassed and he walked away. On his way to the bathroom, the kid saw Taesik and his partner discussing where to spend their stolen money. They passed each other, with Taesik talking about some ideal student. The jerks were still talking about their own stupid stuff, and Yeon studied them out of the corner of his eye. They seemed so pathetic to him. Suddenly, Yeon heard strange sounds from a stall and saw this, a truly horrifying sight, and the kid understood perfectly who had done this. When he asked Homyeon if he was okay, the poor guy just bolted out of the stall, looking terrified. But who was he to interfere? Kang Yeon decided to just ignore it. Meanwhile, a new lesson began, and a new homeroom teacher, as well as English teacher Yoon Ji-ho, entered the classroom. Kang Yeon was glad that at least time was passing much faster than when he was training. Now that he finally got his grades for the first semester, he just needed to keep working hard for another year and make it to the top of the school. Suddenly, his eyes landed on Chang Taesik, and that poor guy. They were in the same class again? He just needed to make friends with the rest of the class and study peacefully. That was it. That was all Yeon needed. On one of those typical days, Kang was walking down the hallway when he saw Taesik bullying the poor guy again. This time, it was about a move that the bully hadn't been informed about. Taesik threatened Homyeon that if he transferred to another school, they would find him and finish him off. And believe me, he wasn't joking. Meanwhile, the days passed just as quickly. Kang Yeon was studying excellently and rapidly moving toward his goal. Suddenly, something caught his attention. Just outside the school, Taesik was beating Homyeon again. This time because he hadn't brought him the required amount of money. Kang Yeon couldn't pretend he didn't see this. He would have advised that poor guy to at least fight back against Taesik once. Even if nothing came of it, the bullies would think twice before attacking again. But it wasn't his business. Yeon turned around and went home. There he was greeted by his mother and uncle, along with some changes in the gym. It turned out they were doing renovations. Yeon told them about his test, which greatly impressed his parents, who had doubted until the last moment that their child had become a nerd. His mother was pleased, while his uncle dreamed of his nephew becoming a great athlete like him and his brother. That's why Yeon continued going to the gym, so as not to disappoint him. Suddenly, the nephew decided to ask how his uncle had fared in school when he was an athlete. Yeon's tone changed slightly, but his uncle didn't pay it any mind. The nephew wanted to know if he had bullied the weak. This question even outraged the uncle. Of course not. Training was pointless if a person used their strength to bully others. A truly strong person just stayed silent, and if he saw others fighting, he stopped them. Then the mother asked about her husband, as he had told her he was a true gentleman in school. The uncle smiled as he recalled his brother and confirmed that he had never bullied other kids, but it annoyed him that his brother also studied well. Yon asked if he understood correctly that the strong would remain silent, while the weak would bully even weaker ones. The uncle realized that school hadn't changed over the years and that there were still many bullies. Yon calmly recounted the students who had been bullied for a long time and added that while bullies annoyed him, the weak also seemed pathetic to him. Suddenly, the uncle's tone became more serious. He asked what the names of those poor kids were. The uncle was furious. So his nephew had watched his friends for 2 years, even knew their names, and did nothing. After that, the man abruptly stood up, began shouting, and declared that Yon was no longer welcome in his gym. The uncle didn't want to believe that his nephew wasn't protecting the weak, having such strength. Although Yon didn't bully the weak, he had never taught him to just stand aside. Kang Yon felt so ashamed. More than anything in life, he feared disappointing his loved ones, especially his uncle. Meanwhile, a new day arrived. The boy was heading to school as usual, but his uncle's words wouldn't leave his mind. He didn't understand what he should do then. Suddenly, something caught his attention. An elderly woman boarded the bus. She was old, and it was clear she was struggling. Kang Yon stood up and began to tell the grandmother to take his seat, when suddenly he was outdone by Homion. He didn't even think twice before giving up his seat. Although he looked so beaten up, to be honest, Kang Yon was really impressed. After getting off the bus, he continued to watch Homion. An ice cream cone lay on the road and ants were swarming over it. Homion immediately ran over to check out the insects. He was genuinely fascinated. After that, the boy saw a brand new BMW that caught his attention so much that he couldn't help but take a picture. Kang Yon was just in shock. How could Homion be so genuinely happy about life when he was bullied every day? But suddenly, everything changed when they approached the school. Homion's whole mood and enthusiasm vanished in an instant. And then Kang Yon understood what the bullies were doing to that poor guy. How hard it was for Homion every day. He was distracted from these thoughts. Rin came running, and as always, punched her friend in the stomach. In reality, the friend wanted to ask Yon to help them with the test coming up next week. The boy couldn't resist joking about how Kwan Rin herself was interested in studying. While the friends were talking, Chio Hyun, their former sports friend, was eavesdropping behind them. Meanwhile, lunch arrived at school. Homion was all sweaty and panting as he ran with lunch. He was in such a hurry because he had to please Taesik and bring him food on time. Kang Yon heard everything again. He couldn't stop thinking about it. Meanwhile, classes had ended and the students were heading home. Suddenly, Yon stopped and turned around. Taesik was beating Homion again for not bringing money to school, while his partner mocked the nerd for drawing cars in his notebook. Kang Yon was about to walk past when he suddenly remembered his uncle's words. Why had he been wasting time teaching his nephew if he couldn't use his strength for good? Did he really think strength was meant to kill opponents? No, it was meant to protect those you love. That was the last straw. Kang Yon ordered the bullies to leave Homion alone. Although the boy only said a few words, it was enough to drive away the emptiness that had settled in his heart. Taesik found it hilarious. Finally, the perfect student had shown up. He thought Yon was an idiot who should have stayed quiet since he didn't even know how to fight. So Taesik immediately lunged at Kang Yon and promised that from that moment on, he was their new slave. But it wasn't that simple. Yon didn't even flinch and easily shrugged off that idiot's attack. The jerk just fell to the ground under his own weight. Kang didn't even touch him. Homion looked at his savior. Kang asked if he knew his name, and the boy did. That was enough for Yon. He exhaled in relief. After that, the guy declared that he would defend Homion. Meanwhile, Taesik stood up and saw blood dripping from his face. He was furious. How dare that punk do something like this? Taesik lunged at Yon, but the teenager was much more skilled. Homion watched in awe. He was witnessing his main enemy, the guy who bullied him every day for 2 years, getting beaten right in front of him. It was an unforgettable sight for him, the best day of his life. Then Hitada and Taesik's partner intervened, worried about his friend, even though the bully insisted he was fine, just a scratch. So he charged again. Kang Yon barely used his strength. He just dodged or redirected the opponent's blows. Sometimes he blocked, but it didn't even hurt him. Still, Kang Yon had to fight back to make a statement. Taesik needed to fear him, as fear was the only language that punk understood. The bully tried to keep his composure, claiming he wasn't even hurt. He even threatened Kang Yon. So the guy decided to show Taesik what fear looked like. He swung hard, wanting to see the fear in his eyes. Then he abruptly stopped and said that was enough. If Yan hadn't stopped and hit him, Taesik would have been knocked out. When Kang made sure his opponent hurt him, he added that if he had kicked him in the face instead of the shoulder, Taesik would be in a coma. So out of respect for his classmate, Yeon didn't do it. He then ordered Taesik not to lay a finger on any other kids or him while they were in the same school. After that, Kang Yeon extended his hand to Homyeon. He addressed Taesik once more, saying he would forget this incident and the guy could still be the class boss. But he had to stop bothering others. The bully shut his mouth and just stared at the floor, feeling ashamed and scared. After that, they left, and Yeon mentioned he noticed he and Homyeon took the same bus and suggested they walk to school together. Meanwhile, Taesik was simmering with anger and already plotting revenge. Yeon genuinely thought this would be enough, believing it was all over. But it was just the beginning. He and Rin were walking home from school, and his friend complained that she didn't understand anything. She wanted to quit their extracurricular activities, but Yeon had signed up for her sake. Rin couldn't abandon her friend. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by Taesik, who loudly called out to Yeon. The bully asked why the nerd was out so late. This time, he wasn't alone. He had friends with him. Kang Yeon asked how Taesik knew he would be here after school, but his classmate didn't answer, ordering him to shut up and follow them because his time was up. The scene shifted to the playground. The four heavenly kings didn't understand why they were called because Yeon didn't look special at all. Kang had no idea what was happening. Did Taesik hire a gang? The leader concluded that Yeon was clearly a total loser if he didn't know about them. So he explained they were the original four heavenly kings who had devoured the damn sky above. The leader heard that Yeon had attacked their second heavenly king, Taesik the Fist, and now he would pay for it. After that, he ordered the Swift Fire, Park Jong-so, to keep an eye on the queen so she wouldn't escape. Rin couldn't believe she actually heard that Swift Fire. But Young didn't realize he was being mocked and was surprised that the girl hadn't heard of him. He told Rin not to worry, promising she wouldn't be touched, but she had terrible taste in guys. Even when facing death, a man should defend his woman. Young even suggested dating Rin. But the girl retorted, asking if he wasn't supposed to be helping his friends right now. He got carried away and didn't even notice that the bloody ocean, Kim Kibom, had collapsed to the ground. Taesik was shouting that he had told them to be more careful with Yeon. Kang asked his classmate if it was true he had called a bunch of school friends just to beat him. Then he wrapped his hand like a boxing glove and promised he wouldn't let Taesik off the hook this time. Then the bloody ocean ordered all his friends to grab Yeon. The first to go was a big guy who immediately got hit in the stomach. Next was Taesik. Kang Yeon blocked. Then he intercepted the blow. Taesik tensed up, seeing that this time Yeon was using his legs. Suddenly, Rin screamed and ordered her friend not to move. Kang Yeon froze as if he had been electrocuted. Rin started scolding her friend. He had completely lost his mind if he just wanted to kick those guys. Kang tried to justify himself like a little kid who had just been scolded by their parents. Suddenly, the chubby Jung grabbed Rin, saying they now had a hostage. This way, he supported his team. But he didn't expect Rin to turn around and kick that punk between the legs. What did that idiot think when he laid his hands on her? Tears rolled down Young's face as he fell to the ground in shame. Kang Yeon watched all this and was glad he listened to Rin the first time. After that, they left, and Yeon apologized to the medalist girl, asking why he couldn't hit those guys while But Rin interrupted him, saying they were in different weight classes. And anyway, she could, but he couldn't. Then Rin hit Yeon on the leg and scolded him for what he was doing at school if he had such fights. Taesik was getting angrier. After that, there were a few more similar skirmishes, but Yeon thought they were just ordinary inconveniences, especially since he was partly to blame. But he had no way of predicting that the problem would only grow. Yeon should have let Taesik hit him a few times, and it would have all stopped there. One day after lunch, Im Chi-young approached Kang, a guy he hadn't heard of before. Then Gangmun Chang joined in, and the guys were outraged that Yeon didn't know anything about them, as they had been trying hard to stir up trouble at school. After that, they gently suggested Yeon have a talk. But in reality, the guy had no other choice. Waiting for him at the top was Taesik, and Seongchun was there too. And from that moment, a hellish year began. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to reality. The commander splashed water on the barely conscious Yeon and reminded him that he hadn't earned his rest yet. The boy abruptly sat up and continued his training. Suddenly, Huang Chang hit Yan with a bat, but he managed to block it. The commander warned that if the boy didn't raise his guard, his head would soon fly off. After that, the teacher continued to hit the guard while giving Yan orders. Don't back down. Don't close your eyes. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to school. There, Yang Mun sat next to the boss, recalling that he had seen that punk's face before but couldn't remember where. It was driving him crazy. He meant the guy who tried to stop them when they were robbing a warehouse, the same one Taesik had asked to deal with in their sophomore year. Mun remembered Kang Yeon. Sekong Chun seemed to recall the guy and asked if he had changed much. Gang noticed that Yeon had grown a bit taller and lost some weight. The boss asked if it really was him, as the guy had only appeared now after that incident. Gangmun reassured Seongchun that Yeon hadn't changed much, but they hadn't seen him for 6 months after that. Suddenly, Seongchun remembered that Taesik had already talked about Kang Yeon, and the boss was surprised that the guy had actually woken up. Mun suddenly recalled how they had sat in a cafe, and the boss had asked them to be quiet in high school. He had agreed with Seongchun back then, but they overlooked the fact that the boss was a popular dude who had dominated all the middle schools in town. He was too recognizable to attend high school quietly. This thought warmed Seongchun's heart. He really wanted to leave everything behind, but things didn't turn out as he thought. Even though his gang was outraged, Seongchun was genuinely thinking about the future, and they couldn't behave like that anymore. They had to grow up. The boss advised everyone to behave well and start studying. Jiang Mun immediately supported Seongchun. He was tired of playing the role of the school bully, even though he had forgotten how to study. For a while, everything was going really well. Seongchun began to adjust to the routine of an ordinary student. But they were getting too much attention as freshmen. One day, seniors called out the gang and yelled at them for taking so long to show up before the upperclassmen and make a name for themselves. They expected Seongchun to join them and take care of the freshmen, but Gang declared that they were done with that. But the senior quickly shut him up, as he wasn't even talking to him. Then Seongchun intervened, apologized, and asked them to leave them alone. The senior took this as a challenge and ordered everyone to lie on the floor for hits. Not that Seongchun expected this. He thought they would get beaten once or twice, and that would be it. He thought that even if the seniors ordered them around because of his fame, they would at least respect the gang's decision. But it was nothing like that. The seniors didn't understand why Seongchun wasn't listening to them. Why didn't he hear when they said to join them to take care of the freshmen? The gang was getting it because of Seongchun. They didn't know that once you step onto this path, there's no turning back. In reality, Seongchun had a strong confidence inside that he could endure. But after yet another hellish experience, Seongchun just couldn't take it anymore. But he really thought he could. He thought he would endure. The boss exhaled heavily and told the gang that those punks had pushed him too far. And he ordered them to take over that damn school. Meanwhile, it was already dark. The gang met those senior punks. They were glad that Seongchun had finally started thinking clearly. The gang was told they had to help them with the freshmen and were reassured that the seniors wouldn't beat them anymore. In fact, they hadn't even beaten them, just patted them down. But Seongchun wasn't going for that. He wanted to ask one last question. Did they really not want to leave their gang alone? The seniors were irritated. Did Chun really call such busy guys to discuss this crap again? He didn't understand. Did Seongchun really want to die thoughtlessly like this? He was definitely not in the right place to bargain. The senior promised to turn their lives into a daily hell and would start right now. But this time things were different. Seongchun wouldn't let himself be bullied, and he struck that punk back. That idiot now had a broken nose. But that wasn't all. Seongchun wasn't done yet, and he wouldn't be finishing anytime soon. The boss mocked the senior, wondering how it happened that he stopped when he was so serious. The reason was that everything at school had gone off the rails. Those idiots were the seniors. Then the rest of the seniors stepped in to defend their boss. They had thought all along that Seongchun was just a rookie. But the rest of the freshmen quickly dealt with them. Seongchun ordered that idiot to call his sophomore friends. He gave him an hour. Right after that, Yang Seongchun took over the entire school in just a month. And it didn't matter whether they were sophomores or freshmen. He then got rid of everyone who had heard about his past humiliations. Seongchun's group was something special. They were well-trained and quickly dominated even the seniors. Jangmun, who had practiced judo when he was younger, was calm enough and didn't jump into fights first. But when he had to participate, he always came out on top. And the wild dog Lim Chi-young, who was also known for his stupidity since middle school, had a habit of always using his fists when he got into trouble. It didn't matter how much he took. He never fell behind his opponent. And the last member of the gang since elementary school, Min Dai-wung. First of all, his physical strength knew no bounds. He was just a beast. Rumor had it he was the strongest of all because he had never fought Shang-chun and immediately recognized him as a friend and leader, which was unusual. On that fateful day when Tae-sik went to Shang-chun for help, his partner told him that the gang was just crazy and he shouldn't get involved with them at all. But he didn't care. He wanted revenge. So they brought Kang Yan to them, introducing him as the king of nerds. He had no idea what was going on or why he was being called that. Then Tae-sik intervened and started yelling at Kang Yan, claiming he had threatened him, saying if he could defeat Tae-sik himself, which was impossible, then he would do anything to Shang-chun, that Yan would win without throwing a single punch. Yan, of course, didn't understand anything, but tried to explain that he had some disagreements with Tae-sik, but that had nothing to do with Shang-chun, and what the redhead said wasn't worth paying attention to. After all, Yan was just helping his classmate get rid of all Tae-sik's bullying. Then Gangmun said he wasn't sure it was wise to believe Tae-sik's words, since Yan looked like a good guy. But he stood his ground. His friend Lee Jinsu even confirmed this. Jangmun decided that the best solution would be for Tae-sik and Jinsu to fight Yan. Tae-sik started to panic at that moment, cold sweat rolling down his face. Seong-chun agreed with this idea, and Lim Yang swore he would knock them out if they didn't start on the count of 3. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to reality, to the shelter. There, Rovachevsky was playing with a ball. Kang Yan brought the captain something very large, even though Huang had just ordered him to bring more tennis balls. It turned out there were many different things in the warehouse, since it was an old sports facility, so Yeon decided to bring everything. He thought it would be cool to train in full gear. But Huang Chang said Kang only needed the balls. Yeon didn't understand why, so the commander was going to demonstrate. Meanwhile, Rovachevsky was completely mesmerized, as if in a trance. Suddenly, Huang threw the ball and the dog dashed after it. After that, it was Yeon's turn, who didn't understand what kind of training this was. The boy didn't see the point in running back and forth with the ball. What was that supposed to train in him? Suddenly, Huang hit one of the balls with a bat, and Yeon and Rovachevsky's jaws dropped from the impact. The commander said there was supposed to be an elementary school across the road where they would get supplies. The helicopter lands right there. The ball also had to land in that area, so Huang ordered them to bring it and gave them 3 minutes. Without thinking, Yeon ran in that direction. The school was indeed on the next street. Even after a long coma, the boy knew how to get there. But now the task was harder. How to find a small ball in such a large area. Yeon had to search every corner, every bush. And finally, he found that damn ball. With joy and pride, he brought it back to the commander, though it took him 20 minutes. But before Yeon could catch his breath, Huang Chang threw another ball right back in there. The kid had to find the ball in 3 minutes. Some time passed, and Yeon found and brought back the ball. After that, Huang Chang threw again and ordered him to find it. Yeon ran off to complete the task. And then again, the commander ordered him to find it in 3 minutes. He wouldn't let up until Yeon completed this task. Meanwhile, a new day dawned. Yeon brought back the ball once more, barely breathing, and said he didn't understand the point of this training, since the journey alone took him 3 minutes. But Huang Chang simply suggested that Yeon run with gear next time. Everything the kid wore weighed about 33 pounds. After all, the commander believed physical strength was the foundation of everything, and they would stop once Yeon got used to it. In the meantime, evening fell. Yeon brought back the ball again. He had lost count by now. Huang Chang asked if they should wrap it up since the sun had set, but promised that Yeon would be doing this for at least a week. The commander remembered his student claiming to be a good athlete, but it turned out that was all he could do. What a disappointment. But in reality, Yeon's body was really hurting. He wasn't in the best shape. The scene shifted back to the past when Yeon had to fight Tae-sik and his friend. The bullies attacked first, but their assault failed. Then another attack went wide. Yeon dodged easily, but eventually made a small counterattack to end it quickly. Jangmoon noticed that Kang was just toying with his opponents, not hitting, just pushing them away. Then Chi Young intervened, asking the boss for permission to step in. Yeon asked everyone to stop, as he didn't understand what they were doing and worried that his classmates would get hurt if they kept this up. Suddenly, he caught something out of the corner of his eye. Chi Young lunged at the kid, but Yeon noticed just in time and blocked. Then he simply shoved the attacker aside, and Yang realized he couldn't keep up. So he just asked Yeon not to tell anyone at home that he was being bullied at school. to which he apparently didn't get the response he expected. Yun just brushed the dust off his clothes and told Yang to keep those words to himself. This made the bully laugh, and he accepted the challenge. Yun was ready to defend himself. Chi Young asked if he could attack first in that case. But he didn't wait for Yun's answer and just struck. However, the kid dodged. Then another swing went wide. Kang Yan didn't even flinch. Chi Young couldn't understand why his opponent wasn't fighting back at all. He was just dodging like a snake. Suddenly, Yan showcased his skill by completely redirecting the opponent's strike. The big guy just didn't understand what was happening or how it occurred. This time he barely escaped, but Chi Young was a hair's breadth away from being hit. He realized Yon had intentionally missed. Kang understood that for the big guy, this was just a game. Then Chi Young asked Yon to look closely at him, to look at his face. The kid didn't need to be told twice. He understood everything right away. So he immediately punched Chi Young in his smug, stupid face. Everyone else looked away in shame while the big guy complained that Yon needed to control his strength. But now Yang had to do the same to Yon. Excitement lit up his eyes. For him, this was just a game. But Yon also loved to play. Before Cha Young could even approach him, the kid landed a few hits. Despite the incredible pain, the big guy didn't show it. He was still having fun. But his anger was growing as he wanted revenge. And Chi Young was struggling to get it. Yan was always a step ahead. Eventually, Yang couldn't take it anymore and just went wild. He finally unleashed all his fury. He managed to grab Yan and throw him. Yang slammed him to the ground. It looked and sounded very painful. Chi Young roared like a beast when he finally got what he wanted. It intoxicated him, but his desire didn't fade. On the contrary, he wanted more revenge. The big guy Yang lunged at Yon like a madman, but the opponent skillfully blocked his strikes. He could endure for a long time, but it needed to end. Yan charged at Chi Young and took him down. He bravely absorbed all the hits to his back. Chi Young thought Yan was trying to throw him, but that wasn't the case. Yan pushed the big guy away again, because all he wanted was to finish this quickly and not be bothered anymore. Meanwhile, the scene returned to reality, where Huang Chang threw the ball again. Yan was barely breathing. He wasn't even trying to get up anymore. It seemed like he was about to throw up. Huang Chang declared that they could stop right now if Yan didn't want to play, but the kid wasn't giving up that easily. The commander was surprised as they had only been training for a month, and Yewen was already coming back faster than before. He asked Rovachevsky if he had eaten too much. The commander honestly didn't know what to expect from his student, but he never had any expectations for Yan. However, this time the kid really got lucky. He found the ball very quickly and landed it perfectly. And just as quickly, Yan ran back along the well-known route. He was so happy, as he was sure this time he had done it in under 3 minutes. Suddenly, someone punched him in the face. It was Huang Chang. He caught the student off guard. But opponents would never warn you before they attacked. Yan couldn't take it anymore. He was so fed up with this training. The commander announced that from now on, he would decide when the training would end, and ordered Yon to find the ball in 3 minutes again. After returning, the student had to attack Huang and take him down, and he couldn't use anything but his body. The commander also didn't like that the ball kept landing in the same spot, making it easier for Yon. But in any case, nothing changed. 3 minutes. Yan found the ball and was already heading back, after which he received a punch to the stomach from the commander. The ball flew away again. Yan ran after it once more, and then Huang hit him again. And it went on like that until a new day arrived. It was breakfast time, and everyone came to eat. Kang Yan wanted this more than anything in life. He could rest at the same time. Huang Chang didn't like that the student took off his sandbags. He ordered Yon to only take them off before bed. But he realized it was pointless to say anything when the kid was so engrossed in food. Huang wasn't a monster and let Yon eat, after which they returned to that hellish training. Now Yan was getting hit in the face with that damn ball. The kid was so tired of this, he just didn't see the point in what he was doing. But anger consumed his body. He wanted to finish this with all his heart. As he approached, Yan thought about how he would hit Huang. He considered throwing a right hook or hitting him in the torso. So Yan jumped, wanting to catch the teacher off guard. He succeeded. Suddenly, something made him rethink. Huang Chang's appearance threw Yan off. His body just stopped obeying. The student fell down like an idiot. Yan asked why Huang was dressed like that, but that wasn't his concern. The commander needed to protect himself from getting hurt, and Yan was only allowed to leave after being hit. But the kid kept getting angrier, as it was physically impossible to bring the ball back faster, so he was left with no choice but to take down Huang. But how could he do that when he was dressed like that? But those weren't their commander's problems. and he was going to show the student another skill in training. He called Rovachevsky, and the dog's eyes lit up. Then he threw the ball and ordered him to catch it. Rovachevsky did it right in midair. Huang knew this because he had been here a few times, and if you crossed the street, you could return to the shopping complex where the main gates of the school were. He pointed out that if Yan was walking to school and saw enemies he couldn't defeat alone, knowing the area with landmarks would be the best allies. Huang was confident that Yoan could find the ball with this knowledge, as the commander never said to bring it back the same way. Meanwhile, it got dark again. A new day arrived, which meant new hellish training. The ball flew again, once more. Yan dashed off very quickly. This time he radiated a completely different energy. He was motivated for success. 3 minutes. He almost made it. Luck was on his side. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to the past, where Yan punched Chi Young in the face. This infuriated the big guy so much that he could no longer hold back. But Yan remained calm, showing no emotion. It cost him nothing to beat the big guy, but Yan was above that. The partners just watched and offered advice. Then Chi Young couldn't take it anymore and yelled for everyone to bring Yan down. And at that moment, the big guy got hit again in his stupid face. Suddenly, Yan's expression changed sharply. He froze in a ridiculous pose. All because Chi Young was still conscious. How hadn't he fallen? Yan realized just how strong that big guy really was. For just a second, he hesitated and lost control of the situation, and that's when he was attacked. It was Gangmun. It seemed he was tired of these games and wanted to finish things quickly. Although Cha Young was furious, that jerk was still his, but in reality, the big guy had lost too much blood. Yon asked if the new opponent Gangmun was the same, barking but not biting, after which Yon launched the first attack. But Gangmun blocked everything. It was clear he had been involved in serious sports. It seemed that Mun decided to demonstrate his skills in a very direct way. He executed one of his moves on Yon and flipped the guy over. Poor guy landed on the ground with a scream of pain. A smug grin appeared on Gangmun's face. He felt invincible. Yon realized he had just been thrown with a judo technique and took off his jacket, his opponent mimicking him. Mun added that he used to have quite a bit of success in that sport, while Yan stripped down completely. Seong Chun started to pay closer attention to this guy. Meanwhile, Kang Yan had fully undressed, revealing his sculpted torso. The others felt embarrassed by what this dude was doing. In the meantime, the scene shifted back to the harsh reality. Guess what Yan was up to? Right, he was looking for the ball, but this time he found a shortcut. The only problem was getting back. Yan didn't know a shorter way back. Huang Chang guessed where Yan would end up each time and struck first. The commander wanted his student to get faster that day. After all, 4 minutes and 47 seconds wasn't enough. The problem was that Yan simply didn't know what to do to cut down his time. Days passed like this. Everything turned into a damn routine. He wasn't doing anything else. It's worth mentioning that there was some progress, but it was very small. Huang Chang was constantly dissatisfied. One day, Yan found a shortcut, but it was a more dangerous one. It involved jumping from a height. Yan stopped at the edge of the roof. How high was the drop? About 6 meters? Well, once Yan survived a high fall, but he didn't want to take risks every time. Eventually, he realized there was no way to cut the path any shorter, and there was no need to take risks. One day, while they were eating, Huang Chang decided to ask what Yan was thinking about, especially since he hadn't touched his breakfast, even though he had a whole day of running ahead. But the kid had nothing to say. He had been running for a week, but he didn't know how to make it in 3 minutes. He knew he could shorten the path, but he just couldn't make it back on time. Although Yan noticed that his physical strength had noticeably improved thanks to the gear, suddenly, Huang Chang abruptly slipped under the kid's clothes. He wanted to check how his body had changed. The commander remembered that when Yan arrived, he was just skin and bones. But now, the kid was eating a lot and moving, so he had gained some mass. This was all because Yan had muscle memory, so it was easier for him to get back into shape. But what the kid was doing now was restoring his mind. The rules were simple. Kick the sandbag and bring the ball back in 3 minutes, any way you can. But it didn't matter how well Yan calculated everything. He just couldn't do it like before. Then Huang Chang suddenly wondered how Yan even got into sports in the first place. For the commander, it was very simple. He was invited, he had fun, but he started training because he felt he had hit a wall. Didn't Yan train from the very beginning? Of course, if he had done it right, he could have succeeded. But in the real world, true strength is all about connections. Yan didn't understand what Huang meant, But the commander was sure that connections were a person's power and the law of their world. That's when Yon understood. On that fateful day, a guard came in and scolded everyone, and the fight stopped. As promised, Kang was told who had been bullied and beaten, but he was also given a month of community service. Yon was sure the rest got punished too, but he suddenly remembered those rumors. Wasn't that guy the son of a diplomat? Yes, that was the power of business cards. Huang Cheng said that the world had changed, and now physical strength played a bigger role. Then the commander asked if Yan had ever felt, without a doubt, ready to die. Those words made the kid think. The answer was no. Was he ready for that stage? Had he tried to save his friends? Had he said he wanted revenge to rid himself of his anger? It wasn't a real situation, it was just training, but maybe it wasn't just that. Now his mind was filled with completely different thoughts, and his body had a whole new motivation. Yan was no longer who he used to be. He could do this. He decided to lighten his load and took off his gear. But he still stopped at the edge of the roof. The kid stared at the edge. He was confident. Yan returned to the shelter. This time he wasn't in a hurry, walking slowly with his head down. Huang Cheng immediately gave him a smack. The commander was angry. His student had lost his mind. If he wanted to give up, he should have said so right now. Yan said he wasn't going to break the rules with tricks. He wouldn't be such a coward. Huang Cheng thought the kid must have bumped his head on the way, but Yan insisted that the commander throw the ball. He was ready. He was waking up in a body that had once been dead. If his body was the same as it used to be, until it became as light as a sandbag, he couldn't bear those thoughts and justifications. And with those thoughts, Yan simply jumped. He didn't know anything, he just acted. Meanwhile, morning arrived. Kang Yan was still training. He could barely stay on his feet as he rushed to the shelter. 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Last night, the kid was much slower. Yan was furious and looked at Huang Cheng with wild eyes. The kid, barely breathing, asked if that was enough now. The commander ignored the question because he was more concerned about Yan's leg. But he didn't get an answer because Kang just yelled in frustration. He wanted to know if that was enough to finally teach him how to fight. It seemed like that scream could be heard all down the street. The guys moved to the medical station where Huang assessed Yan's courage, but at times it just looked like foolishness. But Yan wasn't sure where to start. They weren't focusing on fighting skills. They were just training endurance. But the thing was, Huang wasn't planning on doing that. He was forcing this training just to make Yan fall behind him. The commander promised it and intended to keep his word, but he didn't think Yan would go and fall on his own. His plan was ridiculous. A small mistake could put his life in danger. And Huang didn't want Yan to do this because of his actions. Ending his life was the kid's decision. But in reality, Kang only trusted him, and he didn't see any other option. It turned out that the real plan was to exhaust Yan and make him give up on his own. But now Huang couldn't stop the kid. However, he wasn't going to participate in such nonsense anymore. Yet Yan was satisfied. It was the first time he had increased his endurance so quickly. When you feel like you're reaching your limit, you push through it, raising the bar. There's no better way to prepare for a fight than on the battlefield itself. Huang was sure Yan would give up, which is why he did such silly training. But the kid declared he would never do that. So the commander ordered him to wear those sandbags even at night and never take them off. Yan exhaled heavily, but he actually liked it. He enjoyed feeling so strong and resilient. He thought Huang must have tried such training methods himself, but that wasn't the case. Yan was outraged. Why was he being used as a guinea pig? But it turned out, the commander had just seen it in Dragon Ball and decided to give it a shot. Yan didn't know about that manga, and he thought it all seemed so absurd and unserious. Huang said it would have been better with a turtle shell, but he couldn't find one. That ended the conversation. The guys were supposed to continue training, but they were asked to switch with the guards. They swapped with 2 men. They also praised Yon's efforts. After all, the kid had been running every day and nearly dying. Yan didn't like that everyone knew about his training, but Huang didn't understand how they could not know if the kid decided not to take the bus and was doing such strange things. There was no time for chit-chat. The commander ordered Yan to clean up, but Kang still wanted to know if Huang had ever tried to make the journey in 3 minutes, how he came up with that idea. But it turned out the commander decided that was just enough and there was no need to check. Yan was furious. What would that jerk do if it turned out to be impossible? But Huang knew it was possible. Kang had managed it. However, Yan stood his ground, so the commander decided to try it himself. The kid was incredibly excited. Finally, he would see that suffering. But Huang wasn't in a hurry at all. He just grabbed a bike. Yan screamed in anger. But Huang never said you couldn't ride something. Yan was screaming in rage, but Huang never said you couldn't ride something. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the school. There, Seong-chun caught Tae-sik red-handed, since the cowardly redhead hadn't informed him about Yeon's return. After all, the first time, Tae-sik swore to the boss that he had taken care of that guy, but now he was seen and seemed perfectly fine. Tae-sik tried to explain that he had just left that idiot to die and promised to deal with it again. But Seong-chun wasn't interested in any of that. He wanted to know if the last time Tae-sik fought outside the school, Yeon was involved. The idiot tried to justify himself again, but the boss understood everything. Seong-chun was fed up with the lies. If Tae-sik had explained everything properly back then, the boss would have dealt with Yeon right away. But a month had passed, and that punk was back. The coward Tae-sik, who nearly wet his pants, tried to defend himself and thought about how strong that guy was, even though they had the same build. Seong-chun tossed Tae-sik aside like a rag. Then he ordered a scout to head to the hideout, gather intel, and report back immediately. So, the scene shifted to the hideout. Yan and Huang Chang were patrolling the hideout while the dog slept. The boy asked the commander if he should just sit there like that. But Huang didn't give him any instructions, which seemed pretty strange. Yan was used to keeping busy, especially with pointless things like chasing a ball, so he didn't know what else to do and started doing push-ups. Huang told him to rest and do nothing, but Yan stood his ground. Then the commander yelled at him, and now he listened. However, Yan was still bored, so he decided to ask what Huang was up to. It turned out the commander was making a mat. Yan's training was supposed to be life or death, but it would be a bit problematic if that idiot actually died. Huang said it was the least he could do. Yan was in shock, and meanwhile, morning arrived. The guys were walking down the hallway. Huang asked again if Yan was sure he wanted to go through with this. He could give him another week, and the training would be over. But the boy stood firm, even though he didn't even know where they were headed. Then the commander opened the door to some basement and ordered him to go in. Yan noticed it was a bit dark inside. There were no windows, and without a flashlight, nothing would be visible. Huang said this was instead of a hyperbolic time chamber. Legendary warriors used this place to level up in no time. The commander promised to provide Yan with enough food. After that, he locked everything up. Day, night, time ceased to exist. There was only one way to get out of the room: steal the key. Huang would come in several times a day and try to kill Yan. When the commander entered the room and locked it, that's when they would start. Yan was horrified. Huang told the boy to steal the key from him if he wanted to escape or surrender. Those were his only options. So to speak, a choice without a choice. Meanwhile, it started to rain. The weather seemed to mourn for Yan in advance. After that, dawn broke. In moments like this, it felt like there was no apocalypse at all. But reality quickly proved otherwise. Days passed one after another. While Yeon was locked up, the scene shifted back to the school. Tae-sik swore to the boss that he hadn't seen Yeon or that strong guy. He thought the boy had left on a bus. The boss listened to this coward, who was trembling to be believed. Then Seong-chun simply went up to the roof, ordering no one to follow him. He sat at his desk as usual. Seong-chun kept wondering where Yeon could have disappeared to. He was literally a vegetable, but now he was strolling around the outskirts. Meanwhile, another bus was departing from the hideout for evacuation. A lot of people had gathered. The commander stood with a broken arm, and a girl thanked him for his work, saying she felt guilty that Huang had worked so hard and even got injured. She wanted him to evacuate too. But Huang wasn't going to. Then Yan approached, and the girl asked if he didn't want to leave this time either. Besides, she felt like he had been hiding all this time. She realized there was no point in arguing further, so she just left. They were grown men and could come back if they wanted. Huang asked Yeon if he was leaving. This time he really would. The commander reiterated that it was very dangerous and that it wasn't too late to stop. But Yeon cut him off sharply, insisting he had to do this. Huang's voice brightened a bit. He was satisfied with this answer and understood that Yeon was ready. Finally, the boy remembered the letter. The commander had given it to the postal bus, but he didn't know when it would reach Yeon's parents. After that, the student thanked him for everything he had done for him, but Huang asked him to save the thanks for when he returned. Then Yeon bowed and was about to leave when suddenly the commander stopped him. He said he was giving the boy only 3 days. A smile appeared on Yeon's face. Mom, Dad, and Uncle. They had already heard, but Yeon was okay. Many people helped him after he came out of the coma, so he recovered quickly. He was planning to return on the next bus. But Jan wanted to check one more thing, so he apologized for the delay. He understood what it was like to be alone in such a situation, but he asked them not to worry too much. Just believe in him and wait a little longer. He also asked them to be sure to tell Kwanren's family if they saw her that she was safe and that Jan would bring her back soon. As he was leaving, the boy noticed that the dog had been following him the whole time. Jan asked him to return to the hideout because it was safe there. Rovachevsky whimpered in sadness. After that, Jan ordered him to leave again and drove off. He knew the dog couldn't come with him. How many were there? 10, 20? In any case, Jan didn't know what the situation was like inside. He needed a solid plan, and it was also preferable not to starve to death. So Jan sat down to grab a snack. Suddenly, the smell of canned food attracted a cat. The boy couldn't help but share, especially since up close, the cat reminded him of Jan. It was the cat that often came to his dad at the factory, and it had a tuxedo just like this one. Jan's dad also fed the cat with canned food. The son even caught his dad doing this once. He initially thought it was food for him. Dad didn't look for Jan's cat. He found it himself when it got cold. Then the son asked why the cat was named after him. But Dad didn't know what to say. It was the first name that came to his mind. Jan didn't know that Dad loved cats. So the man justified himself by saying it was a cost-saving measure because the animal chased away mice. The son didn't believe him, so Dad ordered him to change clothes and get back to work. He didn't want to show Jan any weakness. These memories warmed the boy's heart. Mom, Dad, how nice that they were in the hideout, and they would meet again soon. On this pleasant note, Jan decided to move on. The cat finished off its generous portion. Suddenly, something scared it. It bolted the moment someone approached it. It was some strange people hiding their faces and bodies. Meanwhile, time passed. Jan was roaming the city, devising a plan. Suddenly, he remembered the girl's words about how people wouldn't talk about an alien invasion just for gossip. That day, some rockets shaped like a capsule had descended from the sky, and they said strange creatures crawled out of it, threatening people. Although she hadn't seen it herself, Jan hadn't seen anything from the outside either. She said it was just a lull or an evacuation. In any case, there were many witnesses, so it was very dangerous outside, not to mention the robbers and bandits. But enough! Aliens aren't monsters, especially since Jan had his own monster. He didn't know how long it would take him to infiltrate the school. First, he needed to stock up on supplies, especially since, according to that old man, he had seen that the number of robbers was increasing, so it was better to hide the supplies well. The old man kept talking about the philosophy school, so Jan decided to head there first. Suddenly, he spotted a girl. She peeked out and immediately hid when she was noticed. But Jan couldn't just leave it like that. He cautiously greeted her and asked if he should pretend he hadn't seen anything. He wanted to make sure the child wasn't alone and that her parents were nearby. However, she remained silent, so Jan realized the girl was scared. And he decided to engage her. He created a dog out of shadows and asked her name. It turned out her name was Sonia. Jan introduced himself as Rovachevsky. Suddenly, the girl's father appeared and started yelling at Jan. He was very aggressive. The boy explained that he was just checking if Sonia was safe. This confused the father. He wanted to make sure Jan wasn't one of the raincoat people. But the boy didn't even understand what he was talking about. Then the man told him his story. The family had gathered food in the basement and had been holding out. They heard the news late and went out. But then people in green raincoats showed up and took all their stored food. The family barely escaped. Jan sympathized. He said they should head to the hideout quickly, but the man quickly ran away, saying they were fine as they were. He didn't trust people. He warned that when the sun set, those punks would start roaming the area. Jan just said he would return in 3 days with other people, and then they would go to the hideout together. But he didn't get a response. So Jan just moved on. He stopped by the philosophy school, just as he had planned. He grabbed some supplies there. After that, he was about to leave, when suddenly his eyes caught sight of a crowbar. Use every opportunity. After that, he drove off. He stopped by the same house where he found Sonia. He climbed onto a car and left some food there for the family and for the girl. After that, he was ready to leave. Suddenly, Jan heard some sounds and thought it was Sonia. He wanted to go check and completely didn't notice a raincoat behind him. But Jan didn't train for nothing. He was ready. So the boy jumped back just as the unknown person swung at him. It turned out there were 3 of them. They thought Jan was just lucky. One of them found the food the boy had left and realized there were people in the house. Jan had given them away. While the guy with the bat threatened Jan to tell him where he found the food, Jan lunged at him and knocked the bat out of his hands. Then a guy with heavy metal pliers in his hand intervened. But Jan didn't show any sign of fear. He charged first. He had learned to crawl on walls like a spider. After that, he disarmed the second punk. Only one was left. But before continuing, Jan said that no matter how chaotic the world was, a child shouldn't be afraid of adults, right? Then the guy with the pliers lunged at Jan, who had already ignored his question twice. But the boy dodged, both from the question and the blow. Then Jan kicked the punk straight into the car, so hard that the vehicle bent and even the glass shattered. For a moment, Jan allowed himself to get distracted and think about how there were 3 of those punks and they were armed, yet he didn't even consider for a second that he would lose. This gave him confidence when all 3 charged at him. In fact, thoughts of losing didn't make sense, as Jan was sure he wouldn't take a single hit. Very slowly. They were very slow, their movements were predictable. Why, had it always been this way? All Jan had to do was think, and his body would react. Suddenly, one of the punks threw the pliers at him, right at his back. But from the sound, Jan immediately understood where the danger was. He simply caught the pliers with one hand. After that, he threw them at that idiot. They nearly knocked him out. It landed just an inch from his dumb face. To be honest, Jan's hand was shaking and burning. But he ignored it. The pain he'd get from a beating would be much worse. Then Jan told the raincoats that if they ever came back to this house, they wouldn't leave so easily. He ordered them to scram quickly if they understood him. The raincoats stood up, and for a second there was silence. Then they all burst out laughing, as if mocking him. They couldn't believe Jan actually thought they would run away. Suddenly, the boy heard the cries of a little girl. She was calling for her dad. And then Jan realized there weren't just 3 of them. When he saw her, Sonia was screaming in the arms of that scumbag. He ordered Jan to stay put, threatening to finish off the child if he moved. Jan's hands were tied, but seemed he recognized that idiot. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the school. There, Shang-chun was enjoying an apple when Tae-sik walked in, saying that Kwan-rin wanted to say something to the boss. Seong-chun allowed her to come in. Tae-sik felt a bit of power, so he started lecturing the girl on how to behave and what to say to the boss. But she couldn't care less about Tae-sik. She didn't even look at him and told him with all the disdain she could muster to get lost. He was bothering her. This irritated Tae-sik, but there was nothing he could do. Kwan-rin was about to tell Shang-chun that she wanted to leave, as a lot of time had passed. She hadn't heard any loud noises, and many wanted to check if it was safe outside. Shang-chun remained calm. He tried to scare Rin by reminding her of what had happened earlier. But Rin wasn't stupid. She had seen planes flying overhead. It was for protection. Then Shang-chun reminded her of those who had gone out to check the safety, but no one had returned. Then the boss started talking about people. After all, Rin didn't know how much everything had changed and how brutal the world had become. But even that didn't affect Rin. She said that if teacher Yoon Ji-ho were with them, Seong-chun wouldn't be playing commander. She could see that this idiot was happy that an ordinary school bully had gained power, and she told him that right to his face. Then she asked what he wanted to become next, a god. After that, she got ready to leave and mocked Seong-chun's idea of protecting them. He shouldn't even be fooling himself, because people like him only wanted bloodshed and power. Then Tae-sik jumped in, telling the boss not to listen to that nonsense. After all, if it weren't for them, everyone would already be dead. But even the boss ignored him and just stood up and left. At the exit, he ordered them to grab the key and follow him to the shelter. Seong-chun was furious. Yoon Ji-ho, he was the one who had urged everyone to get out of the school, even though the situation outside was tough. But it had become quieter. The guys were listening to this. Tae-sik was outraged that they had saved their butts, and the idiots were listening to some teacher. But Gangmun didn't care. Tae-sik asked what the boss thought about it, since he wanted to be a leader. Seong-chun said they would stay. Even though Ji-ho insisted they shouldn't be afraid and go out together, he knew there had to be a shelter somewhere. But the boss calmly said they didn't want to leave, but they weren't holding anyone back. The situation was unusual, and they didn't want anyone telling them what to do. Ji-ho understood everything and decided to go check if it was safe, after which he would let the others know. He asked his colleagues to keep an eye on the kids. Meanwhile, the guys had already reached the shelter. Seong-chun threw the apple at the ground. Then he told the teacher that all of this was because of him. In the shelter, Jiho was tied up. How long had he been there? Song Chun accused him of wanting to be a leader, standing out, spouting nonsense, but people still considered him a hero. Him, not them. But it was Song Chun who was protecting the school, not him. If Jiho could, he would have said a lot of unpleasant things. But his mouth was shut. Taesik mocked the teacher. He saw how Jiho wanted to be in charge and maintain discipline. But why then did he come back and sit in complete crap? And anyway, if you counted how much time had passed, they were already adults, and Jiho was no longer their teacher. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to Yeon. Sonia was screaming and calling for her dad, while the boy froze, assessing the situation. Yeon was mad at himself for not thinking through this possible turn of events. While that idiot was shouting, claiming he could easily kill the child, suddenly, Sonia's dad appeared from behind with a frying pan. That idiot was so caught up in his power trip that he got a few whacks to his dumb head. Yeon let out a sigh of relief. He remembered Hwang's words. The commander said the boy was a good person, so he couldn't think like they did. That was his biggest weakness. Didn't he say it before? Bad guys don't play by the rules and aren't afraid to step outside the lines. And no matter how strong Yeon was, he would still get beaten by a bunch of thugs. He was just a beaten-up softy. It didn't matter how much he trained to make his body stronger. Outside the ring, Yeon was still a kid. Meanwhile, the dad grabbed his Sonya back while that idiot bled out. And Yeon wasn't wasting any time. He immediately grabbed that scumbag who was about to hurt the child. Then in a fit of rage, he threw him against the car. It was the least he deserved. Yeon's mind was racing with the teacher's words. For scumbags like that, there was no acceptance of defeat. They would attack at any opportunity. If he couldn't kill, he had to instill fear that he would. And if he couldn't even do that, he should just walk away. But Yeon could. He looked at those scumbags with all the fury and coldness in his eyes. Then he said he would say it one last time. And then, for emphasis, he twisted that scumbag's leg. Yeon declared, amidst the cries of the poor guy, that if he saw them here again, he would break every bone. He assured them he would do it at any cost. Meanwhile, morning arrived. Sonia was in her dad's arms, asking if he was in pain, to which the man assured her that as long as his daughter was safe, he was fine. And Yeon was rummaging through the first aid kit, looking for something for the man, while calming the daughter that everything would be all right with her dad. The boy asked them to wait a few days. He promised he would find other people and then come back for them. After that, Yeon left. But on his way out, he noticed something. The frying pan, the dad had forgotten it. This made Yeon think deeply. He really was a weakling. The captain was right. Because compared to Sonia's dad, who showed courage trying to protect his child, Yeon was nothing. Recovering and knowing how to use his fist wasn't everything. And if Yeon returned to school like this, the outcome would be obvious. Those idiots were no longer his classmates and far from ordinary guys. Yeon walked back into the philosophy school. Then he returned with a crowbar. He realized those guys were criminals. And there was no point in feeling sorry for such people. Before the world got to this state, there were several types of bad people. Those who didn't harm others but only cared about their own hides. That was the first type. Yeon stopped in front of a building that caught his attention. Then he went to the doors, but they were locked. The second type of people was those who bullied the weaker ones. They bullied without a shred of conscience but instinctively feared becoming animals. Even if someone was one of them, there were laws and rules in the world. And if you broke them, there was condemnation. Meanwhile, Kang Yeon lowered a massive angle grinder and started actively crafting something. And he thought further about how there were many people in each category, but now everything was different. When the world became like this, only two types remained. People who lived in shelters and supported each other, and those who felt freedom and went insane. And from that moment on, Yeon stopped drawing parallels. A bad person was a bad person. Meanwhile, dawn was breaking. Kang Yeon emerged from the workshop where he had spent the night. He set off further along his plan. Suddenly, his ears caught some suspicious sounds. Yeon immediately grabbed his weapon and was ready to pounce, but he stopped when he noticed the head of a cat. A smile involuntarily appeared on his face. He called the furry one over and was about to treat him with some canned food again. Animals were never to blame for anything. Yeon now understood that the cat was waiting for his dad. He was the director of this workshop. The boy reassured the cat, saying that everything was fine with his dad. After that, he drove off. He was driving and thinking about his plan of action. Even if someone told him that saving friends through violence was wrong, he would simply ignore it. He didn't care, even if he was condemned for revenge. Meanwhile, he wrote his name on a notepad along with an explanatory note that he would take the form and some things without permission. He promised to pay later. The world had crumbled, and now would Yon become a real criminal? If so, he would just get rid of all the scum. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the shelter. There, Huang Chang was sitting and reading a book. Suddenly, he heard a dog barking. Rovichevsky was holding a bowl, actively hinting that he was hungry. But Huang had already fed his friend, so he decided the dog was just bored and tossed him a ball. The commander realized what a pesky little guy he had taken in. Suddenly, Rovichevsky just collapsed. That was so unlike him. The scene shifted to the infirmary. There was a doctor, and although she wasn't a veterinarian, she didn't notice anything serious with the dog. But when she treated the dog last time, she noticed a few fractures. She hoped everything would be fine. However, she still didn't know why Rovichevsky just fell down without strength. She needed to keep an eye on him. Wang looked at his new friend. He couldn't bear to watch this, so he just left. Meanwhile, night fell. The scene shifted back to the school, where the boys were posted to be on guard and monitor. But they were very bored because there were no people or monsters. They were discussing how great life was. Without the old ones, no one bothered them. One of them said he would love to play on his phone or go to a computer club right now. Suddenly, another one noticed something. A man's torso appeared before them. The boys stood up to figure out what kind of bum had shown up. They asked Yon questions, but got no answers. Suddenly, one of them recognized an old friend. Kang Yon remembered him too. He immediately smashed the radio, not letting the scumbag use it, recalling past experiences. After that, an idiot was about to pounce on him from behind. But Yon deflected that clumsy attack. Then the boy just started giving those idiots a beating. And then again, and again. The boy started to panic. He understood he would be next. When Yon got closer, the boy realized he was looking at his classmate. And it wasn't just his imagination. He barely had time to be scared when Yon pounced on the coward. He promised he wouldn't spare anyone anymore. Because all these people were just cowards who chose this cage for themselves. That one, like the last rat, was about to tell Tasik. The boy trembled with fear. He couldn't believe that Yon was really in front of him, or if it was a ghost. He stepped closer and grabbed his weapon. Then with a sharp swing, he plunged it into the ground. The scumbag's entire life flashed before his eyes when the weapon was just a millimeter away from him. The coward begged for mercy in a trembling voice. Yon ignored him. All he wanted to know was where everyone else was. Meanwhile, events shifted inside the school. There sat Xiong Chun in his room. He had already stripped down and seemed ready to go to sleep. Suddenly, something caught his ears. He shot up from his seat, tense as a string. A smile crept onto his face. Kang Yon. A clattering sound echoed over the fence. Kang Yon climbed over and invaded the school grounds. Song Chun quickly got dressed. His opponent was ready, and he grabbed his weapon. Meanwhile, in another room, Tasik was asleep. But something woke him up. It was Song Chun's gaze, burning into the guy's back. Tasik started to scream, but the boss ordered him to be quiet. The kid said he hadn't heard anything. Song Chun found that strange since 30 minutes had passed, and still nothing had happened. It was too quiet. Then Song Chun concluded that Kang Yon was here. Tasik immediately woke up wanting to know where they had seen that scumbag. But it turned out the boss hadn't seen him. He just felt Yon's presence. Tasik listened to this and didn't believe it. He said he understood how much Yon annoyed the boss, but that wasn't a reason to react like this. However, Seong Chun didn't listen and just ordered him to wake up all the guys and find that scumbag. The boss was dead serious. He wanted to find Yon and have him brought to him. Meanwhile, the girls woke up in their room, all because Rin was getting ready. She wanted to sneak out at night and woke her friend with her preparations. Rin wasn't stupid at all and fully understood that those scumbags wouldn't let them go easily. But she knew her friend was worried about her, so she promised to come back if it got really dangerous outside. However, if Rin managed to escape and find rescuers, she would definitely bring them back here. Meanwhile, Tasik was getting ready and was furious. He had been sleeping so well. What the hell, Kang Yon? No way. After that, he went to wake up his guys. Of course, everyone was unhappy about being woken up. But Tasik didn't coddle them since he had been woken up too. Then he radioed the group at the main gate and asked about the situation there. After that, he contacted the group at the back gate, but no one answered and Tasik got really scared. He started screaming like a madman, but no one would answer him. Yan took care of that. Meanwhile, on the other side of the school, Yan was preparing to invade the building. Recalling the school layout, suddenly he heard Tasik on the radio, screaming like a wild man and calling those scumbags on the stairs. Yun realized that panic had set in, and he needed to act faster. However, this didn't make him anxious at all. He continued to think everything through at his own pace. Yun tried to remember a place where no light reached. The basement corridor in the gym. Meanwhile, Choi Hyun's partner came in, asking why he had called him. But the guy just abruptly stood up and left, asking him to cover for him for a bit so he could use the restroom. The partner got angry. Couldn't Choi Hyun go by himself? He wasn't guarding a bank. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, that idiot saw Rin. But before he could react, the girl lunged at him. He got scared and screamed like a girl. Rin was a master athlete. She didn't even break a sweat taking that idiot down. After that, she grabbed the radio so they couldn't report her. But that idiot seemed not to fully understand who he was dealing with and lunged at her again. However, it wasn't hard for Rin to explain everything to him once more. She even missed fighting. After that idiot was knocked out, Rin could leave calmly. Meanwhile, Kang Yeon was hiding outside. He was waiting for the right moment. Those who wait always have a plan. When those idiots turned away, Yeon quickly dashed across. At that moment, Taesik appeared, and he was furious when he saw the guards tied up like first graders. Taesik couldn't believe it. Really, Kang Yeon? Where had he hidden? At that moment, a group of guys showed up, running in with bats. Taesik didn't even know what to do, but he was the one who had called everyone together. But now he didn't want any witnesses. He said it was no big deal. Because of one scumbag, he was afraid to accept help from the other guys. No, they would handle it themselves and wouldn't call the older ones. So Taesik ordered the others to follow him. On the way, he saw two more patrollers and asked if they had seen one scumbag. The guys tensed up. They were worried something had happened, but they hadn't seen anyone. Taesik was so furious, everything annoyed him, and those questions from the guys just made him angrier. Suddenly, they heard some clattering from above. Then Taesik declared that there was an intruder in the school, but they would find him and take him down. It turned out that the sound was the clattering of screws against metal. Kang Yeon was throwing them in one spot one by one. A good number had already gathered. After that, he looked at his hand and pondered. 3, 4. If there were more than 5, would he manage? Suddenly, Yeon heard shouts from below, getting closer. They were coming for them. So the guy hit all the screws back. And at that moment, Taesik and his gang appeared. The former classmate broke into a grin. He was so happy to see him. Taesik was glad he found Yeon and said what an idiot he was for making noise and getting found. He should have been quieter than a mouse. However, Yeon didn't let that idiot gloat, stating that he had made noise on purpose to be found faster. And they were still late. This infuriated Taesik when he realized the power wasn't in his hands. So he yelled for everyone to catch that idiot. But Yeon immediately ran away, and everyone chased after him. This all felt like his game, which he forced others to play. While they were chasing him, Yeon quickly counted how many people there were. 9. It seemed everything was planned down to the smallest detail as the guy ran straight to one room. At the entrance, Yeon quickly glanced back to see who was following him. All the idiots rushed into the room behind him, and they fell right into his trap. Yeon immediately shut the door behind him, locked it, so the rest couldn't get in. Taesik initially didn't understand what was happening. Then he decided that Yeon was just an idiot, and it made him laugh. He laughed, thinking they had cornered the guy, and he had nowhere to go since there was no exit ahead. However, Yeon decided not to hide that he was the one who locked them in here. But Taesik realized that he was just a stupid idiot. They were on the 4th floor. The exit was on the other side. Did he really think there were only these doors? Did he think he could separate them just with doors and deal with them one by one? After all, he was alone in the whole school. Had Yeon overestimated himself? Did he really think he could handle it alone? That thought amused Taesik greatly, to which Yeon simply replied that it would be hard to change. Earlier when he said that, he heard it in response. If you change your attitude, reality will change, Plato. For a person, that was the greatest truth. Meanwhile, events shifted to Lim Chi-young's room. He wasn't sleeping. Something inside him wouldn't let him. But then he decided it was probably nothing special. Meanwhile, the guys left behind were trying to get inside, but no one was opening the door for them. And inside, hell was breaking loose. Yeon was alone against a bunch of scumbags. Taesik wasn't going to attack first by himself. He ordered the others to grab the guy. They had the numerical advantage, but Yeon was ready for this. He had excellent armor and even better fighting skills. So he easily dealt with a portion of the idiots. Yeon had drawn many conclusions during this time, and the best one was to make a great weapon so he wouldn't have to dirty his hands unnecessarily. Taesik saw that his partners weren't in the best shape, so he ordered everyone to jump on him together. He hoped that would lead to victory, but it didn't work out for them. Yun divided and stopped them with just a wave of his weapon. This only further enraged Taesik, but it was beneficial for Yun. His opponent couldn't control his anger. And then he took advantage of that. Another attack that Yin deflected. While he was busy with the bunch of idiots, Taesik didn't miss his chance. He thought that if he could take Yun's weapon, but his opponent was much smarter. Yun even found that flattering. Taesik hoped that at least that would work. So the guy just handed over his weapon, offering Taesik to try at least that way. This infuriated his opponent greatly. Yun hoped for that. One wrong move, and he controlled the entire situation. Taesik didn't even have time to do anything. He was tossed aside like a rag. Yun didn't even exert much effort, to be honest. Meanwhile, outside, the guys were just screaming, hoping it would help and they would be let in. Suddenly, unexpected guests appeared, who were disturbed from their sleep. Lim Chi-young. He was furious that he hadn't been allowed to sleep. And inside, all the scumbags were knocked to the ground and defeated. Yan sighed in relief. Just a little more to go. Suddenly, unexpected chaos burst in. Lim Chi-young was first angry at Taesik for the circus they had caused. Yan tried to assess the situation and come up with a new plan. He recognized Lim Chi-young immediately, but while the scumbag recalled Yan, he managed to land the first blow on him. He was distracting and buying himself some time, but Yan felt that the guys had changed a long time ago. If this had been the old Taesik, Yan would have already fainted. And if Lim Chi-young had joined them, then it was time to take action. But first, he had to change his position. Yan simply jumped through the window, shattering the glass. At that moment, Rin burst out of the school. She heard a strange noise and turned around. But looking at the school from that angle, she saw nothing. Yan just leaped out of the window like Spider-Man. But the end of the weapon snagged on the windowsill. He easily jumped down to the floor below. Although, to be honest, the landing was pretty rough. Still, it was way better than a scuffle with a bunch of lowlifes. Taesik couldn't believe Yan was such a psychopath. But he tracked where that idiot had gone and ordered everyone to run downstairs quickly. Lim Chi-young was with them now. On the way, he wanted to find out if it really was Yan. The big guy was so pumped. He had been thinking about Yan off and on anyway, but this time he was determined to win for real. The kid hadn't gotten far when Lim Chi-young was almost on his tail. He needed to come up with a new plan, and fast, or maybe he already had one. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the boss's room. There, Seong-chun was loading and testing his gun. He aimed. From this distance, he should be able to see. Seong-chun hesitated. Should he shoot? While Yan was running, he thought about how hard it wouldn't be to take down Lim Chi-young. A fight in the open took longer. Others could show up. But Yan didn't have time. Lim Chi-young was almost on the fugitive, but the kid quickly and sharply escaped the trap. But the big guy's behavior only fueled his motivation even more. Yan managed to pull ahead just a bit. Lim Chi-young decided and told the others that Yan was heading for the terrace. Meanwhile, the kid was counting how many people were chasing him. 5, 6. There seemed to be 7 in total. They really did make it to the terrace and thought they had cornered Yan. Taesik couldn't help but laugh. Did that idiot really forget the school layout? They were right. There was nowhere left to run. But were they sure they hadn't trapped themselves? After that, Yan suddenly turned around. Taesik was ready to start the fight. He was so confident. After all, his older brothers were around to cover his back at any moment. Suddenly, Yan climbed onto the railing. The others gaped, waiting for something to happen. Yan just jumped a huge distance. And, he landed. Yan made it. His opponents were just shocked. They couldn't believe that was even possible. That's when it dawned on their tiny brains that this wasn't the old Yan. Taesik quickly commanded everyone to chase that punk so the others wouldn't sense his fear. But Lim Chi-young suddenly wondered why that vegetable, who had been in a coma for so long, showed up on their turf. Taesik was a bit scared of Yang, so he quickly shifted all responsibility onto Seong-chun. Lim Chi-young ordered some poor guy to bring his red bag. Then he asked Taesik what Seong-chun had said about Yan. The redhead didn't understand the question. It turned out Lim Chi-young wanted to know if they could take that punk if he survived. Taesik didn't answer. A chill ran down his spine. He just ordered Jin-soo to tell the guard to watch the entrance. Meanwhile, Yan had run a good distance away. He was strong, but he wasn't a robot. He needed to rest a bit, gather his thoughts, and figure out what to do next. It turned out Yan was way more tired than he initially thought. Lim Chi-young? He had shown up way too fast, so now Ewan couldn't finish things. The kid didn't rest for long. He had to keep moving down the hallway to the gym. Meanwhile, Rin was hiding on school grounds. She couldn't understand why it was so crowded that night. Rin suspected something might have happened, but still, she didn't like it. She crept to a corner when suddenly she heard some noises. Rin decided it was probably just the guards. But it was Kang Yan. He had also heard the strange sounds and started listening closely. These two had no idea how close they were to each other. Yan had come to school to rescue Rin. The girl was about to carefully crawl out of her hiding spot and check the situation when suddenly a man spotted Yan. So the kid had to run fast while the guard shouted into his radio about a burglar. But the man didn't get to finish telling his location because Yan quickly knocked the radio out of his hands. Rin peeked out to see, but unfortunately she didn't recognize her friend, just his back. Rin found it strange that someone had broken into the school. Who could possibly want that? Meanwhile, Choi Hyun returned to his usual post and saw, why had he even asked to be replaced? But Choi Hyun immediately recognized his friend's handwriting, Kwon Rin. So the guy dashed downstairs, hoping to find and catch up with the runaway. He went into the dorm to grab his stuff. In reality, Choi Hyun wasn't just doing his job as a guard. He genuinely cared about his friend and didn't want to lose her. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the street. There was that poor guy who was supposed to bring the bag for Lim Chi-young. Before he could fulfill the request, he was intercepted by Gangmun, who asked what had happened. He was told about this burglar, and then Gangmun realized things were bad since it was really noisy outside. And the guys were still chasing Yan. To be honest, they hadn't been physically active for a while, so they quickly got tired. Taesik was furious. He suggested splitting up to search for that punk. His friend was worried since Taesik had just been through a rough time, but he just yelled back. After all, Lim Chi-young might hear his shame. Meanwhile, that big guy nearby was taking deep breaths, after which he suddenly shouted Kang Yan's name. Lim Chi-young was so enraged, he was fed up with this game of tag. Seong-chun even heard the shouts from his room. He was really happy. If Yan had shown up on his own, it meant he thought he could take them all on. So the boss was curious about what state he would show up in. Meanwhile, Choi Hyun burst out of the school just as they shouted Kang Yeon's name. Kwon Rin also heard her friend's name. She froze in shock. Choi Hyun couldn't believe it. He hadn't heard that name in so long. Rin's body started trembling. She couldn't allow herself to believe in this joy. It was just impossible. She must have imagined it. And Lim Chi-young shouted again for that punk Yan to come out and fight. Suddenly, a rock hit his thick head. It was Kang Yan. He had come alone, straight to his doom. The kid told himself to stay calm, because if they all attacked together, Yan would be in deep trouble. After that, everyone, as if on cue, all ye rushed after Yan. Of course, he wasn't planning on fighting them. He wasn't an idiot. Yan had rested a bit, so he was full of energy again. Lim Chi-young immediately climbed after him while the others stood around, unsure of what to do. For the big guy, this wasn't much of a problem. After that, Yan climbed back up since his legs could handle however much he jumped. It felt like every finger of his was filled with energy. Meanwhile, Yan was watching the chase, but his body felt like it was ready to explode. Yan was so grateful to his teacher at that moment. However, Lim Chi-young was right on his heels. He was trying not to fall behind, probably more because he couldn't believe that some Yan was stronger and quicker. But the big guy wasn't doing so well. The others saw Lim Chi-young's failure and decided not to repeat those mistakes. Meanwhile, according to Yeon's plan, everything was going perfectly. He reached the gym and dashed through the back door. The others followed him. After that, Taesik ordered them to split up. Two were to go to the main doors and block the hallway, and Lim Chi-young ordered a guy with a flashlight to shine it down. He couldn't wait to catch that Yan. They moved forward, peeking into every room, but they couldn't find him anywhere. Lim Chi-young was yelling like a madman. He was so fed up with all this. He suggested that Yan finally fight him one-on-one since they hadn't been able to determine a winner last time. Suddenly, Yan spoke up. He asked if they hadn't already done that, and then the guys realized where that punk was hiding. Yan found it strange that Lim Chi-young didn't remember. After all, usually the one with a bloody nose loses. The big guy was incredibly furious. That punk had embarrassed him in front of the guys. Lim Chi-young said he had bled himself. Yan was still hiding. No one had noticed him, so he quickly threw a screwdriver. It flew straight at the flashlight. Those idiots didn't even have time to react. After that, Yan threw another one, and then another flashlight broke. If you stepped into a dark room without windows, where even moonlight couldn't reach, at first, nothing would be visible, like in a dungeon. But from Yeon's experience, after about 5 minutes, silhouettes would start to appear. But if you repeated this a few times, the ability to see would manifest much faster. Yeon practiced this in the basement 10 times a day. His teacher would come in, and when the door closed from the inside, the light would go out until silhouettes began to appear. But this was all not just for training his sight. Yeon knew what would happen then. For a while, he was just getting beaten by the commander, because when nothing was visible, there was no chance to escape. But now Yeon was endlessly grateful to his teacher. Screams started in the basement. Lim Chi-young was so scared that he would be attacked. He was ready for an attack at any moment. He listened closely to the noise, but it didn't help him. Yeon still struck first. What a stretch. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the shelter. There, Hwang Chung was sitting with Rovachevsky, reminiscing about how it was when he was first brought here in a wheelbarrow. The dog had no place on him that wasn't bruised, and his gaze was filled only with resentment and anger. Then the commander remembered Yeon. He wasn't interested in the kid since he wasn't the first to come to him after everything that had happened. Moreover, Hwang wasn't ready to care about anyone. He still didn't believe he had dealt with that student who was more like a wild beast. Hwang wanted Yeon to drop that stupid idea, but he was very stubborn. But Rovachevsky, that one was a real character. Hwang didn't know if his dog understood him, but he addressed him. This was the dog that literally rose from the dead. Rovachevsky had to wait for Yeon. Meanwhile, the scene shifted back to the school, more specifically to the basement, where Lim Chi-young was about to lose it from anger. Yeon had hit him so hard that the big guy flew far away. Lim Chi-young was frothing at the mouth. How dare that punk do this? So the big guy decided to strike back. Spoiler, it didn't go well. Yeon reminded him that he had already said the games were over. He revealed his voice. So Lim Chi-young lunged at the sound, but he didn't succeed. Meanwhile, Taesik revealed himself by asking Yeon if he had been hit, after which he lunged at Yeon with a stick, almost succeeding. However, Kang Yeon had a clear advantage. He had brains. Taesik called him a coward, but it seemed he didn't know the meaning of that word. So Yeon reminded him how that punk had bullied helpless old folks. I think he explained it very clearly. Yeon also reminded everyone about the innocent dogs that were beaten. Meanwhile, another idiot chimed in from behind, wanting to help Taesik. But in reality, he ended up helping Yeon. After that, he grabbed the hand he had hit Taesik with. Yeon reminded him that he was no longer just a bully acting childish to look cool. Now he was a criminal and a thief. So Yeon showed Taesik what happened to those who stole. He broke that idiot's arm. Yeon didn't even feel sorry for him. Suddenly, someone grabbed his bag from behind. Yeon reacted quickly to that, but he was too late. Lim Chi-young realized who he had caught. Yeon tried to fight back, but the big guy was too close. Lim Chi-young pinned him to the ground and felt around his head. Just as Yeon had said, the big guy was starting to see in the dark too. Then he started pounding Yeon's head. The big guy was thrilled that he could finally fight. At first, Yoon had the upper hand, but now that was no longer the case. But it wasn't that simple. Lim Chi-young had always underestimated him. However, that only excited the big guy more. You know what they did when there were no classes in school? Then Lim Chi-young grabbed Yeon. He lifted him off the ground and slammed him against the wall. That hurt. To Lim Chi-young, those screams and groans were like a lullaby. So, fueled by adrenaline, he pressed Yeon against the wall, crushing his body. Then Lim Chi-young howled like a beast. He was so proud of his strength. And then he kicked Yeon again, asking when he would wake up in the hospital. He reminded Yeon how long the guy had been lying there, hoping to drain his motivation and strength. But it seemed like Lim Chi-young was only getting stronger. It felt like he was sucking the energy right out of Yeon's body. Because the kid was feeling really bad, he was losing. Meanwhile, the scene shifted outside. There, Kwon Rin was about to climb over the fence. She made it to the top, when suddenly someone grabbed her leg. It was Choi Hyun finally finding his friend and demanding answers. Kwon Rin wasn't going to take that and promised to beat up her childhood friend. But Choi Hyun just wanted to know if she was really planning to leave. When Gangmun realized this, he quickly climbed over the fence. Then he reached out to his friend and declared that they would go together since it was dangerous alone. Suddenly, someone over the radio asked if the person who got caught was Kang Yeon. They just couldn't believe what they were hearing. Then the radio asked again why no one said Yeon had returned from hiding. Rin's eyes lit up. Meanwhile, in the basement, Lim Chi-young was beating Yeon. But the kid showed no signs of life. So the big guy ordered someone to check if Yeon was still alive. Lim Chi-young just couldn't get enough of how quickly he dealt with Yeon. He was so proud of himself. Meanwhile, in the shelter, Huang Cheng was telling Robichevsky not to protest that the commander sent Yon out so early. After all, he had never seen such a fierce person in his life. Yun would have done what he wanted anyway. The commander tried to break him, but nothing worked. It was on the third day. He had endured everything, and Huang was about to give up. Yan was beaten and nearly lost consciousness, but then suddenly he got up and charged at the teacher. Meanwhile, in the basement, while Lim Chi-young reveled in his victory, Yan grabbed him from behind. He reminded the big guy that it had been a long time since he woke up from his coma. And now it was Yan asking what Lim Chi-young thought he had been doing all this time. After all, he knew what monsters were, and maybe the big guy was stronger than before, but definitely not stronger than Yon. The kid was nearly losing consciousness, when suddenly from behind, Taesik hit Yon on the head. It was a brutal blow. Taesik shouted that his other hand was still fine. He needed to break both. He was about to deliver another hit. But Yon quickly countered, so the kid had fended off two of the toughest opponents, but he still hadn't won the fight. But there was a little time to gather his strength and rest. Suddenly, the room was flooded with light. It was that guy with the briefcase, Lim Chi-young. He had a flashlight in his hands. The big guy was incredibly happy. Now he had light in his weapon. It turned out that Lim Chi-young had been learning how to use weapons all this time and had taught the guys too. It was his hobby. He offered Yon to take something too. Now they could continue what they had started. But if Yon died, Lim Chi-young wasn't responsible. That's what he said. Down below was Yon's sword. The kid easily tossed it up to himself. He agreed to those terms, not even feeling scared. They say people have the ability to hide their potential. In desperate situations, without even realizing it, they start producing much more energy than usual. For example, to save a child trapped under rubble, a mother lifted a stone weighing over 220 pounds. During a disaster, a grandfather held onto a carousel with one hand for an hour, while keeping his granddaughter safe with the other until they were rescued. Sometimes critical situations show us what we're capable of. Huang Chang didn't know if animals experienced this, but he told Robichevsky that he really hoped the dog had died once and come back to life so it could do it again. The commander didn't believe in what he hadn't seen with his own eyes. Kang Yan had seen such things, so Huang thought that at some point Robichevsky would wake up. After that, the commander abruptly stood up and left. He was so angry. He couldn't help Robichevsky. He had done enough already, hadn't he? Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the school. There, a panting Homyoung was struggling to carry a box of water. The other guys were outraged that it took so long. Homyoung caught a glimpse of the guys discussing someone who had snuck into the school. Suddenly, the guys mentioned the name Kang Yeon. Homyoung immediately perked up. His heart started racing. He had definitely seen Yeon a few times. Meanwhile, Lim Chi-young was swinging his sticks, intimidating his opponent. Then he tried to pounce, but nothing worked. Yeon landed the first blow. Blood started flowing from the big guy again, just like before. Then he tried to hit again. Yeon blocked. Another strike from Lim Chi-young. Yeon was trying not just to flail his arms. He wanted to come up with a plan. He struck at the leg, ducking sharply. Then Yeon hit Lim Chi-young in the chin with his head. Now blood was coming from his mouth too. Lim Chi-young just went berserk. So he suddenly grabbed Yeon and tossed him like a ragdoll. The big guy even noticed how easily that punk flew. He had taught Lim Chi-young to fight properly when suddenly something hurt in his side and he remembered. Yeon noticed this and seized the moment to gloat. It would be strange if Lim Chi-young's ribs didn't hurt from such a hit. But the big guy wasn't about to show weakness and said it was just ticklish. So Yeon decided to test it and hit the same spot again. Then Lim Chi-young groaned. His ribs really hurt for real. Yeon built a new strategy. Now he would only hit where it hurt. Suddenly, he remembered how Huang Chang had hit him on his injured leg. But the commander wanted to teach him that opponents would never hold back and would only strike at vulnerable spots. So Huang hit that leg a few times to make sure Yeon remembered. If you keep hitting one painful spot, it will hurt even more. Meanwhile, Yeon picked up Lim Chi-young's weapon. He raised it and handed it to the big guy, reminding him that it wasn't just a club. Was he really that uncultured? After that, Yeon demonstrated the highest level of skill with that weapon. Lim Chi-young was in shock. Yeon didn't understand what he was staring at. After all, the kid's dad had trained and his uncle practiced martial arts. Then Yeon asked if Lim Chi-young had ever been given a sandbag. Yeon had been playing with it since he learned to walk. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to the schoolyard. Jangmun arrived at the gym entrance and asked the guards what they were doing. They explained that Taesik and Lim Chi-young had locked themselves in there, asking to close the doors and wait. Jangmun thought his guys were winning the fight against Yan. Then he said there were two exits, one on the other side and one here. He ordered to open this door, close the other, and keep watch. And also, Jangmun asked if they had anything sharp. Meanwhile, inside, Lim Chi-young was getting a serious beating. To his stupid face, Yan was landing hits every time, targeting almost the same spot. Lim Chi-young was no longer in control of the situation. So Yan took full control and struck Lim Chi-young in the ribs again. It seemed like he even heard a characteristic crunch. But that wasn't all. Yan remembered, you always have to finish what you started. And this time he did just that. So Lim Chi-young, did blood accidentally spill? That guy with the flashlight ran in to help the big guy. Yan was catching his breath and recovering. And that guy analyzed Kang's condition and decided the kid was very tired. So he realized this was his chance. If he could catch Yon, he could make a strong impression on the guys. But Yan wasn't even trying. But then, he threw away the weapon because, in reality, Yan was really tired. But he understood that there was no time to rest. It was just the beginning. So Yan headed for the exit. To that exit on the second floor, he carefully and quietly opened the door. He didn't rush to go out, and for good reason. Because at the exit, he saw Gang Mun, who said he had doubted. But still, Yeon had defeated Lim Chi-young. Yeon immediately realized that a fight was unavoidable. Gang Mun noticed that the kid looked better than in their last encounter. Kang first asked if Gang Mun was alone. The opponent realized that if he were alone, Yeon would have tried to beat him. Gang Mun was right. Yeon immediately took a stance and was ready to pounce. It was going to be quick. But he made a huge mistake, thinking that this idiot was alone. Yeon suddenly started to realize he was in deep trouble. And it was really bad. Gang Mun just hated putting in a lot of effort. They threw a net over Yeon and pinned him down. Gang Mun radioed the boss to say they'd caught the punk and asked what to do next. Yeon knew he couldn't just give up like that. He had already come too far. He could escape if he took them out one by one. Gang Mun noticed that those two idiots couldn't handle Yeon. So he decided to take matters into his own hands. He grabbed Yeon and slammed him against the wall. That hurt like hell. Then he turned back to Songchun. The boss said they needed to head up to the roof. He had to be there. Gang Mun immediately understood what was about to happen. Yeon had fallen up there on the roof. A sly smile crept onto his face. Yeon heard everything perfectly. And honestly, he felt scared. He needed to get a grip on his emotions fast. Gang Mun ordered the idiots to stop kicking Yeon. One was to go back to Lim Chi-young, and the other was to tie up Yeon and take him to the roof. He grabbed Yeon's weapon and couldn't believe he had managed to break in with it. Meanwhile, Songchun was sitting in his office. He thought he was caught. It was total chaos, but was it really it? Suddenly, Songchun jumped up, grabbed his weapon, and headed for the roof. Meanwhile, events shifted to another part of the city. There was a robot, and it was busy with its own tasks, fixing something, assembling something. Then suddenly, some gadget sprang to life. Observation object 219, probability 0%, 220, 221, 222, all 0%. Up to number 222, probability 0% recording transmission. Observation 223, start new search, new time. End of observation, target signal found. Observation object 19, time expired. Probability rose to 0.43%. Meanwhile, at the school, they were carrying Yeon to the roof. Rin and Xiao Hyun were watching all of this. They were trembling and couldn't believe it was really Kang Rin. She tried to get a better look to make sure she wasn't imagining things. Tears welled up in Rin's eyes. Yeon really came here. For her. She immediately lunged forward, but Xiao Hyun stopped her. Rin started shouting. She had to help Yeon. Jangmun, in the meantime, ordered his henchmen to let the others know they were here and to bring Songchun up. One henchman complained it was hard to carry on. Cho Hyun told Rin that the first floor was where the guard rested during shifts. But she didn't care how many were down there. They took Yeon. Rin couldn't hold back her tears. Yeon, he had just come out of the hospital. He was so close to them. She and Cho Hyun had to get him. Her friend tried to calm her down. They needed to find another way. They couldn't just go out now. They needed a plan. Just then, something crashed nearby. It was Hom-young, who looked just as wrecked. His voice trembled, and he couldn't believe it was Yeon. He cried and swore he could help them. Meanwhile, they had already made it to the roof. Gangmun ordered them to toss Yeon somewhere and come over to him. He told another henchman to bring 3 chairs to the roof and to sit Yeon down and bring him water. Suddenly, Gangmun heard a rustle. He immediately knew who it was. Yan was coming too. He asked if Gangmun wanted to be in his place. Silence fell for a moment. Then Gangmun burst out laughing. Wasn't Yan just lying there unconscious? What was he thinking? What could he do in that net? Had he been pretending to be out cold the whole time? Suddenly, Yan shot up and punched the punk holding him. He admitted he had been training for a month and had gained a strength Yan couldn't explain. He felt strange. Somehow, since then, Yan could use it whenever he wanted. But Gangmun just found it funny. An idiot who couldn't even escape from a cage. It seemed like it was too early to laugh. Gangmun was in shock. His jaw literally dropped. The guy couldn't believe what he was seeing. And Yan wasted no time and immediately paid the punk back for everything. This monster was genuinely terrifying. From the outside, it seemed like some kind of power had possessed him. Then Yan said he had rested a bit before coming out, but he was still tired. It had been a long night. So he just pulled out a can of fish. Gangmun simply couldn't believe this was really happening. Meanwhile, Yan was eating and said he was starving. Then he mentioned that according to his plan, he had to deal with Gangmun before Shangchun arrived. He added that the boss would be here soon, so he warned that he was going to recharge and they would continue. Gangmun listened silently with a serious face. Then he couldn't help it and burst out laughing. He asked Yon, even if he got lucky, didn't it seem to him that this was still too arrogant? Did he really think that because of his new strength, Gangmun was easy prey? But he was Gangmun. Yan said the way he was playing "You Know Who I Am" looked pretty silly. Just as he finished eating, Gangmun lunged at him. But the attack wasn't very well timed. Yan dodged, then pounced on his opponent. Then he ordered him to give him a minute. Gangmun was going crazy from such audacity. He grabbed Yan's weapon, and with a shout, he prepared to attack. Did he imagine himself as a Neanderthal, hunting a mammoth? But he didn't expect Yan to be able to withstand. The opponent was stronger. Then he hit Gangmun in the head, and then thanked him for handing over his weapon. Gangmun was getting angrier and angrier. Then he pulled out his taser and threatened to kill him with a single move. Gangmun wasn't going to play nice like Lim Chi-young. He could take him out right now, but it wasn't worth it. He'd be done for when Shangchun arrived. Yan simply reminded him that he thanked Gangmun for returning his weapon. Because he knew and remembered about the taser, Yan was much more prepared than they all expected him to be. Gangmun tensed up a bit. Yan declared that he didn't care if they fought from a distance, and asked how Gangmun felt about that. He wanted to see if that punk could dodge. Meanwhile, Homyoung brought water to the guys. Then he said they needed water up top too. The guys ignored him. Homyoung was counting on that. Now their bad attitude toward him worked in his favor. In reality, the poor guy was barely holding back tears. Was it really Yan? Had he really come to? Meanwhile, Gangmun was barely managing to dodge. He definitely didn't expect this turn of events. The element of surprise was working on him. Yan asked what the accuracy of the taser was. He might miss this time. Then he suggested Gangmun come closer if he was so confident. That infuriated his opponent. He was ready to shoot when suddenly, Yan's weapon grazed Gangmun. The first blood was spilled. He just couldn't believe he had actually lost. Yan stated that Gangmun's actions were only making the situation worse. But the opponent just found it funny. Yan was happy with his new toy, but in any case, he was alone. And Gangmun didn't need to stress himself out fighting him, since Yan wouldn't escape from here anyway. Because the rest of the guys were holding him at the door, and Shangchun would be here soon too. After all, this was the roof. Yan probably wouldn't jump. Oh, right. Gangmun completely forgot that he had fallen from here last time. He hoped Yan hadn't hit his head too hard. But Yan wasn't scared. He said he was just trying to slow Gangmun down. He was such a coward after all. But he also needed to deal with the opponent before everyone arrived. That infuriated the idiot. How dare Yan call him a coward? It seemed like he was just waiting for Gangmun to get angry and come closer. He dodged the first attack. Then Gangmun finally grabbed Yan. But it wasn't that simple. Yan pulled the hook toward him, and Gangmun's neck cracked. Then he punched the opponent right in the gut. Gangmun fell back. Then Yan pulled again. He grabbed the opponent and took that punk down. Gangmun writhed into pain and Yan reveled in it. Now he didn't look so tough. Although that idiot was still trying to fight back, defending himself with a chair wasn't such a bad idea. But not when your opponent is Kang Yan. He asked Gangmun if he also lost consciousness from training too hard. Then he declared he would make sure the opponent couldn't move for a while. Suddenly, Gangmun began to plead. He reminded Yan that the last time he fell, he wasn't around. That idiot finally realized that Yan had become much stronger, and if Shangchun, Gangmun swore he would help him. Whatever he wanted. But Yan didn't need that. He had not only trained, but also gained enough sense not to trust enemies. Yeon was planning to leave that punk lying here all alone. Meanwhile, Hom-young was carrying water. Suddenly, someone called him. He started making excuses. His anxiety was showing a bit. The guy told Hom-young that he had already brought water and didn't need any more. But the poor guy was still trying to find a way inside. Then the guy said he would go up with him. That punk needed to wake up anyway. Hom-young asked if he was talking about Kang Yeon, to which he was told that idiot came here alone. He was done for. Suddenly, that guy realized, how did Hom-young know so well what was going on? He remembered that he was actually a friend of Kang Yeon. Hom-young started trembling with fear. Meanwhile, Yeon was ready to finish this quickly. He had little time. While Gangmun was shouting that he had already given up. Suddenly, at that moment, the guy with Hom-young came in. He reported that that coward really wanted to get to the roof. Kang Yeon immediately recognized his old friend. Hom-young saw him and started crying right away. He said he was so glad Yeon had woken up. Suddenly, Gangmun jumped up and lunged at Hom-young. He was hitting the poor guy with all his might, as if he hadn't just begged for mercy. Gangmun threatened. If Yeon moved, he would break every bone in Hom-young's body. They had found his weak spot. Gangmun just couldn't contain his glee, because now it was his turn to play. Yeon was told to drop his weapon and throw it to Gangmun. He had no other choice. The weapon fell. Gangmun immediately pulled out the taser and lunged at Yeon. No, this wouldn't do, he thought. But it was too late. His body was already jolted by the electric shock. Yeon's body wouldn't obey him, but he couldn't pass out. He had to fight. Meanwhile, Song Chun walked in, stunned that Gangmun still hadn't dealt with Yeon. He asked the boss to wait just a minute since that punk was almost dead. Yeon was still conscious. Gangmun lifted him up and started to beat him down in front of Song Chun. The boss was shocked by this behavior. His partner was nothing like himself anymore. He ordered Gangmun to let Yeon go, but there was no way he was going to agree to that. He was furious. He pinned the punk to the edge of the roof and threatened to throw him off. But Yeon said it wasn't worth it, because he would jump himself. Zongchun froze in shock. Hom-young had a hard time seeing, and that made it even scarier for him. And Gangmun just realized what was about to happen. Yeon simply flipped backward and was falling. But that punk was tied to him. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to another part of the city, to the robots. A sphere resembling an eye was racing somewhere. The UFO approached the forest. It flew past it. It turned onto the roof of one of the buildings and arrived at observation object 2713. The robot told the guy on the roof that he hadn't eaten in 52 hours. Humans were too weak and needed food. But the guy ordered him not to talk to him until the robot could get there. The alien continued, saying that among the other observation objects, there was a chance of awakening. Observation Object 2713 was transmitting cooperation. It shouldn't be ignored. But the guy declared that he didn't care about the rest and just wanted to be left alone.